take a hike and give them a heck of a time fighting it. They still want to control the Templar. Some of them are willing to settle for partial, for half control, because the Emerald Covenant of 248,000 years ago, when it was restated, said, okay, we'll evolve both races. You have your Anunnaki hybrid races here now, even though they didn't belong here in the first place. But they're here if they will work peacefully and enter the Emerald Covenant. When it comes time for Earth's Templar to be turned back over to the human lineage, it will be turned over to both, under the direction of the Azarites of Sirius B, who have the whole security contract on this 15-dimensional time matrix on behalf of the Brenau. They agreed to that then. They messed with it in 22,500 BC and totally broke it. They've done this in various other time periods in history. But when it came to 1992, it seemed like all was going to be well, because you were going to have the majority of the Anu and Anunnaki races saying, hey, you know, we both have our beings down here. Let's be fair. The Palladian Council, Palladian Alcyone Council, all this Palladian material you see popping up through the channeling movement, about 85% of that is coming out of the Palladian Nibiruan matrix. Some of them say we are the Nibiruans. Other ones say we are the Palladians. You know, they come in lots of different self-descriptions, but it's the same groups. Now, these were beginning to, after many years of conflict and doing a lot of damage here, they'll talk about after the break of what they've done here, and this is where the twinning event that's on the paper comes into. But after all of those years of abuse, they wanted us, they would agree to work cooperatively with us, betting on the fact that we wouldn't go into full stellar activation. So it would really just come down to evac. Because if we didn't hit stellar activation or went through part of it and it didn't work, the planet would hit pole shift, and then it would be time to just evac. And they needed our help. They needed more enforcement if they're going to evac their races, the hybrid race lines, who they know who they are. They track the race lines here. So they said, well, it'll be in our best interest to enter this Emerald Covenant this time. So they promised to support it. And from 1992, they have been trying to do that. They've been giving partial ascension teachings without nasty twists in them. They've been helping. Meanwhile, they still have control of Gate 4 and part of Gate 5. Okay? They promised, as part of the original Emerald Covenant of the first one on Earth 248,000 years ago, they had promised that when the next stellar activation cycle came, they would return control of Gate 4 and 5 over to the Azarites and to the Emerald Order so they could make sure the planetary grids functioned properly. Well, in 1992, they agreed that they would do that, as they had promised all those many, many eons ago. Everything was going well until January 1st of 2000, when lo and behold, because of the Azarite team here and a bunch of things that went really well in the higher densities, we actually did something called rounding the stellar bridge on a 12-code pulse, which meant a full 12th dimensional stellar activation cycle could take place, and the planetary Templar would activate on a 12 code, and much to the Anunnaki race's cringe, it meant activation of the Emerald Covenant restatement. It was time. The stellar activation cycle was commencing. The Brenau had promised that they would return the Cloister Doratory Plate teachings, and they would return the planetary Templar over to human control. This is what has been going on through this whole New Age movement as it's been building. Well, when that happened, there was a lot of problems with the Anunnaki races. They realized they had some leverage. Well, for this to work right, you need gates 4 and 5, don't you? They made a really bad judgment call, the Council of Nine from Nibiru, that are part of the Palladian Nibiruan Council. They attempted blackmail of the Brenau. Said, if you don't let us put our Anu Melchizedek hybrid race from inner Earth as full guardians of the Templar, and humans would be, of course, under their direction, then we're not going to give you back the Stargates, and it's going to make the place go into pole shift. You don't do that to the Brenau. You really, I mean, you have to have some strands missing to even come up with that thought, you know. And the Brenau basically said, we won't even dignify that one with a response. You know? So no, they were not going to the Brenau were not going to violate the Emerald Covenant by putting an Anunnaki hybrid race in dominion over humans, over the Templar. Like, what, are you nuts for even asking? They weren't happy about that. They were not happy at all, but they were also intimidated about the fact that right now, Draconian legions are also collecting on the planet because they want the Templar too. And there's one race called the Necromaton of Inner Earth that has most often sided with Draconian legions. It's a hybrid race that's part Anunnaki, part human, and part Draconian. and it tends to not like anybody. They're from seeding 2, actually. They popped up in seeding 2 before seeding 3 even started, and they're primarily inner Earth race. They have very low tolerance to sunlight, so they're subterranean even when they come on surface. And they're what's known as the Men in Black in our contemporary UFO movement. They are members of that, and they all look very much alike. And they are the nasty of nasties. The Necromaton, that word that goes with their lineage, has to do with the necromancy and the teachings of very negative metaphysics and occult sciences that went into really nasty stuff like Satan worship and all that kind of stuff. All of that stuff was planted by them to really get us twisted up. Okay? So, what was happening in the contemporary times since 92, or actually since January of 2000 when stellar activation cycle it commenced, the Anunnaki groups who agreed to help us didn't really want to anymore because they didn't want to share equally with humans control of the Templar. They wanted to have their Anu Melchizedek races, which are half Anunnaki, half human, in control over the Templar and over humans because they didn't trust humans, and also because they knew that the Anu Melchizedek races have more sympathies with the Anu races than they do with the human races, even though they're half of each. That was rejected, but they're still agreeing or wanting to agree because they feared that, okay, they come in here and be tough and they let pole shift happen. They get control of the surface. Then there's those nasty little Necromaton things that'll come up from inner Earth and they might really just wipe us out because they like the Draconians better. They were a little intimidated by the fact that if they did make that grand stand of rebellion against the higher councils of light, they might actually get control of the Templar and wipe out humans. But then they were going to have a real draconian problem on their hands, and they weren't sure if they were going to be able. Now, draconians, they have the Necromaton. They have the D10 density 4 draconian matrix. But the Necromaton, because they have Anunnaki coding as well, have D11 access. So these are the big, nasty, dark avatars. And these, a lot of them, they actually came out of the Nephilim race, which was from seeding 2. An Anunnaki human hybrid race that almost wiped out the human races on the planet. Okay, so they were intimidated by the fact that if they weren't sure they had enough support to actually handle taking on the Necromaton if they happened to side with the Draconians, which they had been doing. So there were all these issues going on. As we moved into the year 2000, we were doing planetary shields clinics. We were being guided to go to areas and run frequency through the DNA to put Maharic seals up and to clear out some of the grid damage in certain areas. And we had a lot of success in some of the things we're doing. Everything was looking really, really good. On July 5th of 2000, there was something called the Treaty of Altair that was signed, sealed, delivered. Treaty of Altair resulted from a group of the Anu races that were affiliated with the Council of Nine, Iberian Council, the ones who had the Stargate control. They're taking a neutral ground in density 3 in what would appear from our systems as the planet Altair, or the star Altair. It's a neutral ground Brahmarama planet. They kind of don't take sides with anybody and just try to help everybody. So it was like a big interdimensional meeting of, what do they call them here? Caucuses or something, when they bring a bunch of the people together that really don't like each other at all, and they try to work out solutions that will work for all of them. There were many issues, and the Treaty of Altair stuff is going to be put in the glossary of the next printing of Voyagers 2, because it's new data and we don't have time to do a whole new book on it. Some of it's going to be in the handbook for this. This is all very new data that we were not allowed to release before. I didn't even know it. They wouldn't let me know it. And I'll tell you why they wouldn't let me know it. The Treaty of Altair had the agreements made that the Anu legions, the ones that had originally promised to support the Emerald Covenant, they would continue to do that on certain conditions. A, they were protected from any backlash from the Necromaton race that they might get for doing so. B, they would hand over the Stargates if certain things were done in certain ways. They wanted equal share in the Templar control, which was doable, not particularly smart, but doable. And they wanted us to withhold the history from 22,500 BC up to now. What they did with the Christ movement, what they did with the Anu God concept that they implanted here and twisted the Dora-Tora plates. The stuff that came up from Atlantis, that was from the twisted teachings of Thoth, ended up coming up into more twists that dealt with the creator god Anu in the Enki and Enlil story as they were seeding Sumerian culture. They didn't want us to know about that. They didn't want us to know what they have been doing ever since, because if we knew, we weren't going to like them, and we weren't going to want them here, and we weren't going to be cooperative. The Brenau orders couldn't agree to withhold that data. That would be lying by omission. But they did agree that in order to give the Anu races time to prove the sincerity of their deeds and of their commitment to the Emerald Covenant, they wouldn't release it right away. They'd release, the history pertinent that humans needed to really know now to get their, memory back and their ascension codes back and get the Templar. But they would wait till humans had developed a little bit more compassion and had a little more knowledge about the whole thing before they'd let us know how badly they had abused this race. Because if they were ever going to co-evolve with us here, and they came in with us knowing what they did here, coevolution wouldn't happen. And they were a bit right on that. Most humans, if they knew what those races had done here, and they show up in spaceships and say, "Hi, we want to co-evolve with you," it's like, good luck, go back to Nibiru. You know what I mean? So we had agreed, and actually they were afraid when they tried to co-evolve, they were afraid that when the knowledge of the cloister Duratura plates came out, not only would, if they tried to come in here, there'd be problems where they would be rebelled against, but they were afraid that once the information on the different race strains and the fact that there are certain human race strains here that carry their consciousness and their DNA templates, once humans were able to tell the difference, they were afraid that they would try to exterminate them all. And therefore, and the really sad thing was, they didn't care about the fact that they might exterminate, that other humans might do what they tried to do, which was to try to get rid of that race so the others would control the Templar. They weren't concerned much about their humans down here as individuals or anything. What they were concerned with was losing numbers. If it was identified, and humans could start identifying which people had Anunnaki consciousness because they incarnated out of that matrix, and which people had Anunnaki hybrid gene codes, they were afraid that they would wipe them out and they'd lose numbers, which means they'd lose control of their share of the Templar. They didn't care how many got wiped out. What they cared about was, no more feeders there, no more people to manipulate there to stand our ground to control that Templar, which is really sad. It was a really bad motivation. This shows you some of the consciousness distortions that the Anunnaki matrix carries, and it's because of their code convolution. So anyway, the Treaty of Altair was finally negotiated. It was negotiated ever since the grounding of the Stellar Bridge on January 1st, 2000. By July 5th, 2000, it had been agreed upon. They had agreed to turn over Stargate control of Gate 4 and 5. That actually occurred in August when we were guided to Peru to participate in these events. The Peru trip involved assisting in that transfer of the gate codes back over to the Azurite Council, which hold the whole security contract for the gates in this time matrix until humans can evolve enough to take it back, because it was originally the Human Commission. It looked like everything was going well. Great. They handed it back over. Interesting thing is, though, when you're transferring codes, there's a whole technology behind this that would probably take me weeks to give a workshop on to explain what it means to turn a Stargate back over to somebody else. It has to do with what security seals are on it, what frequency codes are used to access it or to block its opening ability, that kind of thing. In Peru, they turned their coding over, the Nibirian coding, back over to letting it be overridden by the original Azurite coding of the security team, the Universal Security Team. And they were going to next do that with Stargate 5 and finish that process. They did a part of 5, but they still had more to do on 5, and they did all of 4 when we were in Peru. It takes a while for those changes to do something called phase lock into the planetary grids. That means it gets to a point of critical mass where it begins to be the concrete pattern and overrides the old pattern, so the new pattern sticks in the grids. It would have taken a few months to phase lock once the transfer was made in Peru, but everything seemed to be going well. The Treaty of Altair was intact, and it looked like the Anu Legions and the members of the New Age movement that they're attached to were going to assist in fulfilling the Emerald Covenant, and that was wonderful. That would have been wonderful for this race. That's what we all were aiming for. What happened instead, and boy did I get a surprise on this one, we were next scheduled to go to England in September to do more seal opening. We do a lot of seal opening work because I'm part of the security team, and the people that tend to hang around with me are usually incarnate members of the security team, and their DNA holds codes that correspond to security seals on the halls of Amente sites. And if we're not on planet to release it, they don't release, and the place rolls and it clears the territory. That was a very ancient security system put in. So nobody could use this place to access the central stargate of this matrix, which is the D8 Orion Mintaka gate. You can get here directly there from here. Okay. So anyway, when we began the England trip, I think we got there like September 4th. Everything seemed to be going good. We're supposed to open some sites and start to wake up a team of the Amente Emerald Order people over there who didn't know they were yet. It's a wake-up process. So, oh, yeah, I might be one of those. Yeah. So we were taking some of the Cathara healing teachings over. The first set of workshops went well enough. I started feeling really weird energy around, which I didn't feel at first when I got there. I was like, all right, whatever, new country, I've never been here in this lifetime, so. Got into the second group of workshops, and I got hit with a psychic attack like I have never had before. And it's like, wait a minute, I have my Maharic seal up. How in the heck, how could anybody do this? I was infuriated after I restabilized. I mean, it literally whacked my Merkaba field. I could feel it floating all over. I could close my eyes and see my Merkaba field, which is like that Star of David shape that you're walking around inside. I could see it floating all over. It was making me nauseous, dizzy. I felt like I was going to die. All right? Nothing's supposed to be able to go through a full Maharic seal, not to mention what's called a Kundare seal, which comes down from the sound tone levels that all the security members carry. I said, how in the heck did anything get to me? What just happened here? Well, what we were doing was we were doing Kundalini activations, as we were supposed to begin activating more rapidly the DNA templates, to begin bringing in the higher consciousness so people can wake up and remember who they are faster, so they can do their grid work contracts. As per the Treaty of Altair, there are certain grids, or certain portions of the scalar shields, that are controlled by Draconians, certain are controlled by the Anu, and certain are controlled still and protected by the Emerald Order and the Azerite security teams. Part of the agreement had been, the Altair agreement, was that, okay, we're going to go into these areas and you're going to secure your grid sites as well. You're going to put them, combine them with the Azerite sites so they're safe. So when a person is doing a Kundalini activation in this space, they're not going, you open your fields in a Kundalini activation temporarily. You need to do it in a place where the grids are secured, or anything can run through that grid and come up and totally invade and mess with your body. So, the Azerite Council knows this, so they only do Kundalini activation work when they have secured grids. So we went in there with secured grids. What I found out when I got home is what happened. They wouldn't even tell me. They just said, you have to stop the tour. And it's not just you. Something very bad has happened. Just look at it this way. And I'm probably going to break right after this. So look at it this way. We are not trying to scare you. But something has taken place that constitutes the issuing of an edict of war. And I was like, what? Whose war? They wouldn't give me any more on it. They said, it's 911 alert, your security, you listen, go home. I had to cancel the rest of the England tour, which I didn't want to do. I mean, I kind of rebounded from the psychic attacks. How in the heck did they do it? They did it very sneakily. You can't do a Maharic seal. Like when you have a Maharic seal, they can't usually run psychic attack like that. But I had my Kundalini fields open to help transmit the codes that people would need to activate theirs. And there was about 6 members from my own soul group there, which means they have a direct connection to my biofield. They had been infiltrated in their fields, and they had used their fields to run what do they call it, like a disharmonic, I'll just say disharmonic frequency through to try to mess with mine. That's a very sneaky, they only do that when you're somebody that's really annoying them badly, like teaching protection when they're trying to manipulate, that kind of stuff. So when I got back, and only recently have I got the rest of the details on what happened. But what happened in a nutshell, before we go into break, because I want you to just think about this a little bit, and not to be scared, because I don't teach stuff to be scared about. If it's scary and you can't fix it, I won't teach it. Why bother? You might as well have ignorance is bliss. Let's enjoy it while we can. I only teach or have people look at things that could be scary if you didn't know how to look at them, if there's something they can do to change it. And if there's something you can do to change it, you don't have to be afraid of it. What happened was the Anunnaki, the Council of Nine, the Pleiadian Nibiruans, broke the Treaty of Altair. They pulled out of the Emerald Covenant in favor of the Anunnaki evolution agenda, which is Anunnaki dominion over the planetary Templar and extermination of the human race on the planet by initiating covert pole shift and preserving only their chosen ones. Look at the Galactic Federation website and see what they're preparing people for. Their chosen ones. The reason they backed out was because the one thing, well actually the two things that were the real issues during the negotiations of the Treaty of Altair. The one thing was they were afraid that they didn't have the forces to take on the Necromaton. Just in case they did get the planet, they might just get flattened, and they might take Nibiru and a few other places as well. The Necromaton approached them and offered them a treaty and said, we're working with the Draconian forces, and for once, so we can all get what we want, we all know we hate each other, but so we can all get what we want, why don't we do this? We'll help you work with the Draconians. The three of us will work together and unify the Illuminati forces. And if you do this, talking to the Pleiadian Council, if you do this, we're not concerned with surface Earth. The Necromaton don't really care about surface Earth. They're interested in inner Earth and in the subterranean levels of the planets because they can't live on the surface anyway, because they get very sick from the sun. They want control of the inner Earth halls of Amente Stargate temples. That's what they're after. That's, their motivation. So they said, basically, we don't really care about surface Earth, and that's really what you want, because that's where your people need to be to live. If you do this and join with us, we'll let you have what you want. Your Anu Melchizedeks from the inner Earth will be brought up to run the Templar and serve in dominion over anything that might survive or be left after we clear the territory. They liked that. They got the two big issues, why they even considered fulfilling the agreements of the Emerald Covenant. Protection from the Necromaton, all of a sudden they're their buddies, they think. Yeah, some basic stupidity comes with having strands unplugged and distorted as well. You really think they're going to be your buddies? They're as nice as you are, and worse. They got that protection, and they got somebody to say, you can have your Anu Melchizedeks from inner Earth come up and take over the planetary Templar complex. The two things they wanted. It's not just the Anunnaki that want this. It's the members of the fallen Anu Elohim matrix from D11, density 4. The ones that originally fell. The original ones that were part of the Emerald Order and blew up Aramatena that used to be from Avion. They're the ones that are behind the whole Anu movement and its different factions. They're, at this point, in control of a large portion of the belief systems on this planet, and particularly in the New Age. And now, the New Age movement before was relatively, not really safe, because there was a lot of infiltration from the Draconian stuff, or the Fallen Seraphite stuff coming in. But at least, since 1992, when they had entered the Syrian-Palladian agreements, at least there was a common goal. Okay, supposedly we're both working for the Emerald Covenant. We're going to be fair to humans, fair to Anunnaki, we'll be fair to everybody here. The New Age movement was the Anunnaki portions of it and the angelic human portions, or the Elohai portions of it, were working together toward a common goal. Now that has changed. So all of the movements that have been associated with the Nibiruans, with the Anunnaki, with the Ruby Order, are literally taking a counter anti-stance. The Necromaton issued an edict of war. They told the Grail that if they didn't get their guardian races out now, they'd just flatten them. They simply wanted us to walk away. They wanted the Grail to withdraw their attention. Grail said no. There are some things that are happening now because of the Treaty of Altair falling apart. It's not horrible. It's not great either. It was going a lot better before that happened. There's grid work that can be done. Something called a Doradic Phase 1 seal can be put on the planetary Templar complex. And it can override the Nibiruan control on Stargates 4 and 5. In May We're going to Kauai, Hawaii. Kauai, Hawaii is an access point, direct access point for Stargate 6, which is the Sirius B Stargate. Sirius B Stargate 6, a six-dimensional Stargate, which is controlled and secured by the Azarites and the Emerald Order and the Emerald Council, has the ability, frequency-wise, that if you open it and run it through the Stargates below, it will blow any foreign seals on it. Stargate 6 can override 5 and 4. But it also will bring in frequency from 6th dimension much too early. So there are a lot of issues involved with doing this. But if it is not done, and if by 2003 those gates, actually it's because of certain other factors, if by the end of this year, 2001, coming year, if gates 4 and 5 are not secured under Azarite protection, both the Draconian and the Anunnaki agendas, united through the Necromaton, have one common element. They want to create pole shift, what looks like natural pole shift. They're not going to come in and invade in spaceships. They want to instigate pole shift by blocking the grids, so when the natural stargates continue to keep on their opening cycle, which they will, and the disharmonic codes hit from their gates 4 and 5, the place will start to roll. It won't roll immediately. It will take 3 to 5, almost 8, anywhere between 2003 and 2008 is when it would start. If those gates aren't secured by the end of 2001, the Guardians and the Emerald Order races and all the Brenau have to revert to what they call Plan B. They didn't even talk to me about Plan B before, because Plan A was working really well, which was to bring back the Emerald Covenant, wake up humans, and get them to take over the Templar like they're supposed to, right? That was Plan A. We're still working on Plan A and haven't given up. Plan B is evac.
What?
Evac.
Oh, evacuation.
B4. The others block the evac passages.
I mean, we have to evacuate off the Earth?
Actually, sort of, but not quite, but yes, is the answer to that question. Evac is...
Humans or just us?
They'd love to take everybody, actually, but it comes down to this. The human DNA template is directly connected to the Earth's grids and to the Earth's Templar and to Stargates. If you have 3 strands activated, you can't pass through anything that has 4th dimensional or higher coding, or you'll spontaneously combust, and your consciousness goes back to space dust and starts all over. The humans on this planet, most of them, have 3rd strand activation. They will be beginning to go in, if things were left alone and the grids were working right, they would begin to go into 4th strand activation, which is naturally what we're supposed to be going into now. And with the extra work that's being done to amplify the gene codes here so we wake up faster and so we can biologically adapt to the stellar activation, we would normally begin activation of strand 4 and 5, but we'd have to clear out mutations that are in there. What's happening now, and I might as well dump this one while I'm at it. This was the big news that I didn't even know about, but I had the memory of being in the scenario where it began, and I didn't know where the memory fit. I had the incarnational memory of it. The human DNA this time, and this time around, would have a chance of activating properly, but we wouldn't need to do evac if the grids were working right and if there wasn't all these agendas coming up that are threatening to put the place in pole shift. Right now, there are certain frequency generators that run certain disharmonics through the planetary grids on purpose that were purposely put in by Nibiru to make sure the Templar ran currents that would block the activation of human DNA templates. If you have a pattern of frequency running through the humans and you're trying to evacuate them off the planet, some people you can put into what's called an artificial Merkaba, which is you generate a Merkaba field, basically, which is, some people know what that is. It's an electromagnetic energy field that comes with integrating higher frequencies. You can actually bring people through with you. But the problem is, where do you put them when you take them from here? If they have 3rd strand activation, they have to be in a 3-dimensional system. They can't be in parallel Earth, which is about a 1/4 octave higher than us. They'd have to have a 4.5 activation level to be comfortable to tolerate the environment in inner Earth. And they'd have to have higher one for parallel Earth or for Terra or for the higher densities. So what is being done? Several things. The twinning comes into this. But so does the bioregenesis technologies that the Guardians have been giving on how to regenerate and activate as quickly as possible your DNA templates. Because if it goes bad this year, and we're not able to secure those stargates, and nobody can convince those guys to not want to create pole shift here, which doesn't look likely. I don't know what it might take to convince the Nibiruan Council to come back. But you know, with a word as good as theirs, why bother?
What about the Brunel? Can't they just override any of that?
There's a relationship between the Brunel and the systems down here. Most of the time, it's non-interference. The thing is, they are intervening directly. They're bringing the teachings back, and they're blowing the doors off the history, and they're identifying what exactly is happening here, and they're offering humans a chance to consciously enter, even though we're nowhere near ready to really get all of this, because our consciousness has been repressed for so long. They're offering us the chance to re-enter the Emerald Covenant now, the people on the planet, literally, even though our strands aren't activated where they need to be. If they came in, now for them to come in, a Brunel cannot come down and walk around on Earth by itself. If it came down, it would blow up everything in its path because it's so much energy. But what they usually do is send their representatives of the races that are part of themselves in the lower densities, and they send them down as visitors or whatever. And they have been doing that. Right now, the big problem with the Guardian Alliance has faced is Earth's going into stellar activation. If they tried to come in here and do a mass landing so they could say, "Ho, people, wake up. Look at what's happening here. You're in trouble. You're stuck in the middle of an interstellar war that you don't know exists, but you're going to find out really fast if you don't listen," right? They can't do that because so much of the grids are controlled by Draconian and Anunnaki Illuminati forces here that if they tried, both sides, and now that's one unified side, would create stellar wars right in our skies. If you create Star Wars during a stellar activation cycle when the grids are so fragile, it puts the place in the pole shift, which is what they want anyway. So, the Guardians have one way, right now, of reaching people, and that's coming through incarnate members of their own matrix. And there are many of us on the planet that are incarnates from the Brunel levels down through the Elohai, the angelic humans that carry the full coding. It's considered the Grail line here, the line that came up from the Christ period, from Joshua 12. And it was a line way back that goes back to Terra and goes back into the Azurite, the Orifim, Azurite, Anahazi stack all the way up the dimensions. There are people that carry that coding, and usually they're the ones that respond to this work. This is the first way they can intervene directly. But it still becomes the human prerogative. Do we believe it or not? Do we accept it or not? The Brunel are not attached to the outcome of that. They care very much. They love us because we're a part of themselves. They love all of the races in this time matrix. But it is our decision as a human culture. And what's sad is most of this human culture could not deal with this workshop. Particularly those following any of the spiritual programs that are being put out by the Nibiruan Council or the Anu Elohim, or those being messed with by the Draconians. If we look at what's happening here, we have a very interesting picture. 92 and maybe another 10% controlled by Draconian forces. Want to know where they're popping up? Give you a clue. Just like the Anunnaki, but even more so these days, they like to call their God Jehovah. They're coming up through the traditional religions that are saying that the New Age religions are evil and bad and of the devil, right? While at the same time, it's the negative Draconian forces that are pointing the fingers at the Anunnaki forces. Yeah. What is absolutely bizarre is I watched some of this manifest itself in a small way on television. We all did.
Yeah.
The presidential elections in the United States are very, very interesting this year. We had a representative from each side, except ours wasn't there. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I find it was very interesting. Basically, I'm not gonna point fingers here or identify them on camera, but one candidate unknowingly represented one side of the Illuminati forces,
Yeah.
and the other represented the other.
The other side.
Now, on this level, they're probably both, well, at least one of them might be a decent person. The other one is like a person who I think is just waking up to being a person. I don't know. But they don't know consciously what they're affiliated with. You ask them what's in their DNA template, they look at you like you're crazy. They haven't a clue. They're too busy with politics. We watched a demonstration of this fight that's happening in the Illuminati now. Now you're going to watch, because they're harmonizing under the Necromaton banner, where it's bringing both sides together, you're going to find a nice harmonizing happening with our president-elect. He'll schmooze very nicely with the rest of the ones that would have been on the other side. And the other one will be very nice to the new president-elect. There's these dramas, they're manifesting right before our faces. But if we don't realize some of the history and the interdimensional spectrum of what's really going on here, we sit here and get directed by this, get directed by that, and have no idea what's going on. That is probably 90% of the population. What's not good is if you have so much of the New Age movement, which is a big and growing movement, controlled by Anunnaki and Draconian. Then you take the UFO movement, which is about 80% controlled by the Draconians. Okay, so you have like Anunnaki in the New Age camp, and you have Draconians in the UFO movement camp. This is why they're fragmenting. We talked about that in the lecture, about why these two groups, one believes in ETs but refuses to believe in angels, one believes in angels, refuses to believe in ETs. They won't come together, because one of them, they're each representing different sides of the two Illuminati forces that are connected to the primary two intruder groups that are trying to come in here. Then you have this little group that emerged from the Christos lines, the Holy Grail lines, the Christ lines of Joshua 12, that have carried the information, have carried the promise of the Emerald Covenant through many, many incarnations down here. They're called indigo children this time around. They have a specialized gene code. In fact, I usually say to people when I do workshops of this sort, which have very specific frequency signatures, when those flyers are put out, there's a very specific frequency signature in them. People come who are supposed to be here, and those who aren't supposed to be here don't come. These are put out, when we put out the flyers and things, they're put out specifically to interact with the soul contracts for anybody who has indigo children soul contracts. So my audiences are indigo children. And more this gets to be the case. Okay, it used to be in the beginning there'd be like more of them, but we'd like do a middle frequency where it could bring some others in as well. At this point, the indigo children are the reincarnations of the Mente security teams. They are called the Iani Council of the Yanis. The Yanis Ascendant Master Collectives. They come in with the ability to hold anywhere from 24 to 48 codes in those ascension codes in the DNA, which allows them to have the power, if they activate those codes and wake up to who they are, to run the frequencies from the energy matrix, those sound frequencies. They can run what's called the Kundare. They call it the Kundare, is the primal sound field, and the Kirashe is the primary light field. The indigo children are different than most people that come in on this planet at this time.
They were just birthing now, though.
No. They've been birthing for over 100 years. Little groups here, little groups there. The big birth waves are coming in now as the babies. But the ones that are on planet.
There he is.
And so very true. Some infants, you just feel this, hello, I know me, do you know me? No, that's usually an indigo baby. It is a wake-up call to the Mente, Emerald Order Mente security team, which were the ones that were originally commissioned with the Emerald Covenant 248,000 years ago when it was restated here, that they would serve as guardians over the halls of Amente Stargate access points on Earth in the event of stellar activation cycles until the human populations evolved enough to reclaim their original commission as serving that purpose. We have reincarnated over and over every time the possibility of a stellar activation cycle came in. We have been trapped here because things that the other sides have done. Once upon a time we came in bodies that were called Orifeme bodies. The people that are in indigo bodies now, 216 years ago, when the stellar activation cycle started to go bad, came in literally in physical form, densifying themselves down from their Orifeme state. but they couldn't stand the tolerance of the carbons in the atmosphere, and it made them weak, where they were not able to run the frequency they were supposed to run to be able to put up the security seals here. And a lot of them were trapped in the incarnational cycles here because of it. There were more trapped in 22,500 BC, when it didn't go into stellar activation, but a whole team had been put on planet to assist in stopping Nibiru from taking control of Earth's grids. This is where Thoth came in. And it's because of Thoth not fulfilling the promise that he'd made to the Emerald Order Brunel, that the Eoni Council, that were indigo children then, see, they hybridized a little. They took the Orpheum imprint and combined it with one of the inner Earth race called the Brunel Melchizedek cloister. It was a mixed cloister race, which means it has a little bit higher gene code than a plain cloister or a root race human, but they're human. Combine it with that and the original Orpheum human to make a stronger carbon tolerance in the bodies. That's what an indigo child is here. Indigo children came in specifically to activate their templates progressively when the time came to be able to anchor the frequencies of the Ki-Roche light fields and the Kundere sound fields, and to bring with it their ascended master levels of consciousness, their Janus consciousness. The reason they call them the Eoni Council, Eoni means of the Janus. At this point, if you end up in one of my workshops, it would probably tell you something about the soul contracts you have. I won't tell you that something, but I'll put the idea out there for you to play with and think about and reach for within yourself. Because if you feel that you are part of the Eoni Council, the commission is to protect the planetary Templar and the Emerald Covenant interests until the human lineage is capable of doing that itself, and then to turn it back over. And right now, we are on 911 security call, because the place is being invaded by space invaders. Again. If there's enough of us, it doesn't take billions of us. If we have only a handful compared to what the other movements have, it doesn't matter. What matters is we can run the Kundere, and they can't. There's grid work that can be done that will also accelerate our own evolution, because it'll jumpstart our own gene codes faster to be able to do it. We're being called to help, and this year is a big year, because the Kauai trip is about getting back control of gates 4 and 5, overriding the Nibiruan codes. I'm going to take a little break, and when we get back, I'm going to talk to you about something. I'm going to tell you what it is, and I'll tell you about what it is later. It's called the Nibiruan Diotic Crystal Grid. And I'll just say this was an artificial technology put in to control our planetary Templar complex. It was put in 22,500 BC. It was presented as a gift, a big Trojan horse. It's still in operation, and it has been ever since. This is something that we also need to override, that they were supposed to disengage, as per the Treaty of Altair. So, I'm going to let you think about whether maybe you're part of the Eoni Council, maybe you're an indigo child, maybe you have the DNA that can actually fully run the Kundere. And if that was true, what might it mean to you with the information that's been shared here today? This is why this was a closed group. This was a master's level group, and I knew the people who were supposed to be here would be, and I knew it would be nobody from this area. Not yet. Tomorrow will be much more fun, much lighter material. We'll get into our angelic humanness and learning how to really play with that on a personal level. But this was the serious one. This was the security call. So we'll take maybe a 10, 15-minute break, because my lips are sticking together. I'm so thirsty. Okay. And come back and finish up more.
Excuse me, Anna.
Yes.
At the expo in
Whoop. Everybody back? What? Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. Out of my brain, actually.
You were saying something about the that beings with the 12 strands can't stay on the Earth for some reason.
Well, the grids have to activate enough to be able to hold beings with 12-strand activation. The planet, grids, and your DNA template are intimately intertwined. If the planet grids are not accelerated enough yet to hold a full 12 code, anything that comes in with a full 12 code is going to crash the grids. The first full, consistent 12 code activation that's going to happen is going to be with a child that's going to be born with the 12 code activation. if things go well. It's the same child that was born with 12-code activation in 12 BC. They call him Sananda, except the New Age movement guys from the Anunnaki side hijacked that name. That's really the soul name, or the higher identity name of the one known as Jeshua Melchizedek, or Jeshua 12. But right now, the Anunnaki legions are trying to make it look like it's actually Jeshua 9, and they're hijacking the whole story to try to make it look like it's theirs. But anyway, the planetary grids have to be able to sustain 12-dimensional frequency, like the whole harmonic of it, before beings can fully activate and keep a 12-strand activation on the planet. Jeshua Melchizedek is coming back. So you hear these things about, well, in the Amente book, we got into the 6 silent avatars that we're birthing in under the Eoni Council Indigo Child Imprint. And they're coming in with more strand activation level at birth than the Eoni Council that has been being born in the last 100 years. They had a slower wake-up process because they couldn't come in with that full activation because it would have blown the grids. He's coming back in 2012 if everything goes well. All right. There's also 5 avatars that are coming in before him, and 3 of them are already here. The 4th might be, but I haven't heard yet, and the 5th is due in the next couple of years. So anyway, that was on a question somebody asked about holding a 12 a foot. Could anybody have a 12-strand activation on the planet right now? And I said, no, nobody can have a full and consistent, have your 12 strands turned on right now, or you'd fry the planetary grids. You'd blow the place up. All right. This is why the stuff coming out of the Nibiruan Council and the Anunnaki stuff, oh, you're 12-strand activated now. It's like, yeah, right. Shows you know your grid dynamics. You know, they know we don't know our grid dynamics. But that's going to change if people will pay attention to the Brenau teachings, and if they don't, the outcome is really in human hands right now. Anyway, we'll get back to Nibiruan dyadic crystal grid. This was part of the, when we did the Treaty of Altair, and there was that whole bunch of information on the Cloister Duratur plates, the CDT plates that they didn't want released on the history. This was one of the big parts, was that in 22,500 BC, when the Anunnaki from Nibiru invaded here via the 4th dimensional solar stargate, they implanted the grids here with something called a dyadic crystal grid. A dyadic grid is kind of like, you could understand it better if you think of your body first, of your personal Templar. You have your scalar grid, and it's formed first by what's called level 1 Cathara grid, which is a 12-point grid, and from that the rest of your scalar template manifests. You have a second layer of the Cathara grid that is called the crystal seals grid, that has more points that begin bringing out the manifestation template. Then you have a third level of the Cathara grid that's called the dyadic grid. And it's places where the energy systems from the 2 grids below it begin to cross over each other and form points all over, and then they're all over in the body, but because they're all over in the manifestation template, that form vortices, little tiny vortices. Some of them are larger, and we call them chakras. Some of them are smaller, and we just simply call them vortices. That's called the dyadic grid of the body. Okay? It's a level of Cathara healing. When we're doing healing with the body systems, that eventually we'll learn how to play with that level of the manifestation template. But right now we're doing core Cathara healing. You're doing level 1 first, because that controls all the rest. Now, in the planetary Templar complex and the planetary grids, there is, again, the 12-point Cathara grid, then the next level, which is the crystal seals grid. Crystal seals grid on the planetary Templar complex controls the opening and closing of vortices, ley lines, and the stargate channels, where the main stargate points are the first 12 points. And 3 are here on Earth, 3 are on Tara in density 2, 3 are on Gaia in density 3, and 3 are in the Lyran system where Aramatana used to be in density 4. So we have the Cathara grid of the planet running up the density scale. Then we have the level 2 Cathara grid with the crystal seals, which are areas on the planet that literally have frequency, consolidated points of scalar frequency, that when they activate, open energy systems to bring in interdimensional energy into the planet. Then there's the third level, the dyadic grid, where you have your vortices, your main 7 primary vortices on the planet, which are like the 7 primary chakras in the body. And then you have billions of little tiny vortices all over the place, from medium-sized ones to absolutely infinitesimal-sized ones. that are part of the dyadic crystal grid, or level 3 grid, of the manifestation template. Now, because the Anunnaki are very skilled at Templar mechanics, because they've stolen enough of the information from the Cloister Duratura plates where they had a pretty good head start on us, they implemented in 22,500 BC a gift. This is how they got control over our Templar complex. Now, it wasn't activated then. It was due to activate. They didn't want it to activate because they didn't want the Emerald Covenant to be reinstated, which it would have been then. What they did was use their access to Stargate 4. They came in to the civilizations at the time, into the Atlantean civilizations at the time, and they introduced this wonderful new technology that was capable of amplifying the frequencies that were running through, the three-dimensional frequencies that were running through the grid. It was a crystalline technology, and they told them that all sorts of new types of power could be gained from the planetary grids themselves, even though the interdimensional spectrum wasn't yet activated there. So the Atlanteans were very taken by this new technology. Sound like anything happening today? Well, the new technology was really a Trojan horse. It was a gift, all right. It was a technology built on crystal implants, crystalline structures that are placed on parallel Earth, which has a direct energetic connection to our Earth. When we get into the dyadic grid, we start to understand that there's always an interface of energy, a movement back and forth between our particle and antiparticle selves and the particle and antiparticle version of the body. And they literally flow through the inner Earth, or the inner Earth person. There's basically, we have 3 reality systems that we're in right now at once: parallel Earth, this Earth, and inner Earth. Okay? The planetary body is connected to, this planetary body is connected to parallel planetary body through inner Earth planetary body, through the dyadic grid and the other 2 levels of the Cathara grid. If you implant something in, and this is, we're going to get into this tomorrow when we talk about how to manifest things on the personal level. Parallel Earth and inner Earth are spaces that when we study the dimensional spectra, we find that they're a little bit higher. They're where our dimension 1 would be down here, where our dimension 2 is, parallel Earth's dimension 1 would start. So they're a little higher frequency than we are, which means they're a little bit ahead of us in time. Because of the direct interface of energy between the 2 systems, you can implant something there in a physical form or in a thought form, and it will directly influence here, because literally from there it moves back in time and manifests backwards, and the people here experience it. There's a lot to that technology that I won't get into here. I would need charts and graphs and a whole bunch of stuff to teach you all that, and it's really not important to understand how the technology works. What's important to understand is that there was a set of crystalline grids. They were brought in from Sirius A. They were brought into Nibiru, and Nibiru brought them down here. They were large crystals that are similar to the crystals that they used to restabilize the grids after the Atlantean continent went down. But they weren't good crystals, or well, crystals are kind of like not good or bad, but you can use them for good or not good purposes. When they brought in the Sirius A crystals from Nibiru, they brought them into parallel Earth, and they planted them at key points in parallel Earth's planetary Templar complex. Key Templar sites. Now, the Templar sites, as we discussed in the first lecture, are the places on the planet and the planetary geography that directly are manifest upon the points in the planetary grids that are the control points for the planetary grids. They implanted a set of 12 major large crystal structures, and they look like vertical crystals, and then a bunch, like series of smaller ones all over in the parallel Earth grids. And they're implanted there as they are physical there. Through those grids, which they call collectively the Nibiruan dyadic crystal grid, they were able to begin taking control, the Nibiruans were able to take control of the operation of this Templar complex, of Earth's Templar complex, by running certain electromagnetic program instructions through the crystals there that would directly start to run parallel Earth's grids a certain way, and then it would flip over and run our grids that way also. The Nibiruan crystal grids are the big secret that all of the Anu-related movements in the New Age movement did not want anybody to really talk about, because it was a really nasty thing to do. The programs that they ran through those grids have affected us very, very deeply. They were intended at the time to block human DNA from being able to expand past the third dimensional level, which would block our consciousness of anything except 3D. They had various functions, which is basically to seal this place off so none of the higher levels of self or the higher legions of the not fallen angelics could come in and do anything. These grids have been operating here since that time. This is what the Palladians, people that are channeling in the whole bit, their channels are not telling them this, that since 22,500 BC, they have been literally controlling all of the biological functions of humans on the planet because they know that the human DNA is directly connected to how the planetary Templar complex is running. If you run certain technologies, certain programs like you do a computer, certain electrical programs through the diotic crystals over on parallel, sets parallels grids, sets our grids, and you can set the DNA template of humans. They did some really heinous things through this that we're still suffering from today. The importance of understanding that this crystal grid still exists is that in the Treaty of Altair, one of the agreements was they would disengage it, which would, what the grid did was set a type of frequency fence, a type of net that consciousness couldn't move past. It blocked any Stargate access. So the souls from that time on have been trapped here unless they knew somebody up there, unless they kissed up to the Nibiruan gods, or unless some of the Eoni Council could sneak in and somehow get them out through Gate 6. Souls have been trapped here, incarnation after incarnation after incarnation, not being able to ascend because of the Nibiruan diotic crystal grid, because they used it to jam the Stargates 4 and 5. Stargate 4 is what you need to get into density 2. When a being ascends, gets its strand 4 fully activated, then 5, then 6, when you get about up to 5, you can start going through Stargate 4 and up into full density in density 2. That's called ascension to density 2. They have been controlling and entrapping the consciousness here since 22,500 BC. These are our buddies, the Palladians, that are all over the internet and all over bookstores and the whole bit. Nice people. You know, you could really dislike them if you didn't realize they were part of ourselves on a higher level. Because actually we're all related through the Breno. The Nibiruan crystal grid becomes an issue now because it gives them the power until we override their control on Stargates 4 and 5 using Stargate 6. It gives them the power to transmit anything they want through the planetary grids right now. They can transmit basic DNA suppression things. They can transmit things to stir up your own karmic pattern, to make issues come up for you, to get you trapped and distracted. One of the things that they began to use the grid for when it was originally put in was to neutralize the Eoni Council that was on planet at the time, because they were the only threat to them. The Eoni Council had 24 to 48 strands of DNA. You activate those, you've got a formidable adversary on planet. So one of the first things they did was run programs that would cause harm to the Eoni Council members, to the Indigo children. If they couldn't just neutralize them so the DNA didn't activate, if they actually started to activate, they implanted certain things in the planetary grids that would affect strands 2 and 1 in the DNA template, which means as the higher strand templates of the Eoni Council began to activate and pull in higher frequency, that frequency has to be able to ground into the physical body through the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st DNA strand templates to get into the mental body, the emotional body, and the physical body. By running these perverse programs, they were able to literally create physical illness in the Eoni Council, and they went after them in that time period with a vengeance. Their first objective was not to destroy them. It was to get control of them. If they could get control of the mental body and enter the astral field, they could use their codes to run the grids on a very high level. They could use the security clearance codes that the Eoni carried in their gene codes to begin popping seals on the security seals on the hulls of a mente to try to get control of them. They did that to a bunch of us then. When it comes down to a situation like we're in right now, with the collapse of the Treaty of Altair and the Anunnaki, Necromaton, and Draconians getting together and issuing an edict of war. This war we're not going to see yet on the surface, but one of their plans is to instigate war in the Middle East, to create a world war, because they'll start getting rid of some of the unwanted Grail line races, the indigo children. It'll also keep everybody distracted so they can do what they need to do. It'll also help to block up the planetary grids so it's easier for pole shift to happen. Right now, the Edict of War was issued from dimensions 11 through 4. We always end up in a situation with as above, so below. That will come here if something isn't done on this end as a counter strategy. We can affect change here. When you're confronted with the possibility that you might be an indigo child, and there's lots of symptoms, increased psychic sensitivity, a whole bunch of things. Some of them are going to be listed in the final draft of the indigo book that's going to be available by the end of January in the product list. But I think most of you in here probably don't need to find out if you are one. You probably have a sense of whether you are or not already. They're the first ones they want to neutralize in a situation like this. If they can't get you on their side, then you become a problem. So the first thing they want to do is make sure you don't believe the truth so they can plug you in as an operative in their matrix, because you're a very powerful ally then. So they try to trick, and they try to mislead indigos into going into other camps, whichever ones are trying to mislead. Most indigos, as their DNA starts to activate, which is happening now because the planetary grids are starting to activate, are a bit too smart for that. They just have a sense that something's wrong here, and they don't buy into it. Then it becomes a problem. If it gets really bad, where they start to really remember who they are, they start to get some of their incarnational history back, and they start to really see what's going on here, then they get nasty, and they try to cause biological harm. What is frightening is that right now, they still have the ability, by running programs through the dyadic crystals on parallel, to control these grids enough to run psychotronic attack on the biofields and on the template of the indigos. They're doing it to everybody, but everybody is not their concern. It's the Mente security team that's their concern. I've been having problems with this since I got back from England. I've spoken to a number of people in different contexts without getting into any of this, and there's similarities happening. There's certain areas of the body that will begin to be affected if it's not blocked, but it can be blocked. One area, and it's usually the first to go, is any area associated with the second chakra. Okay? First and second chakras. Usually it starts with the second, then moves into the first, because what they're doing is using the first and second axiotonal lines to transmit the bad coding. There are lines that run through the planetary grids. So the planetary grids on the dimension 1 and 2 level carry these frequencies. It hits the corresponding grids in the body, and it begins to create malfunction within the first and second strands. So as the higher frequency is starting to come in, the body progressively can't synthesize it, and it begins deterioration of the physical body form. They literally, by running those programs, can turn the advantage of the Iani gene code, that high gene code that can pull all that frequency, turning it against itself. Where, yeah, go ahead and activate those frequencies and watch what happens when we block them right here. And the body crashes. Okay. They did it last time and they were successful. It doesn't have to go that way this time. But there's areas in your body you need to be aware of, and aware of their connection to this problem. The Maharic seal, again, and also the liquid light cleanse techniques that are being used in the Cathara manual, that are being taught in the Cathara manual, are very helpful. If I had them on tape or something, I'd just give them to you. And eventually we're probably going to do that. A lot of this stuff, as soon as we have the resources to do it, we want to just get out on the net for free. The stuff that indigos can really do without putting all the real heavy, scary stuff out there. The second area of the body would be the first and second chakra areas. So that's like all the organs in the body that are in through here. You can also have real problems with your base chakra stuff. You're trying to run Kundalini. When you're trying to just have a normal, intimate life, it can mess with your base chakra. It can cause you problems that you really don't want to have. And after it does that, it moves up into the fourth chakra, because they still have control of the solar gate, so they can still blow bad coding down through the fourth dimensional frequencies. The fourth chakra is here, and it connects to the astral field. Oh, by the way, the first and second chakras, it's not just the areas of the bodies. Second chakra goes into the emotional body level, first chakra into the physical body level. So there is an in to mess with the emotional body and the physical body. And then when they use the fourth axiotonal line, which has activated since the activation of Vortis 4 in Giza in, when did we do that? January 2000, that started its activation cycle. That's the astral field. Fourth chakra governs the lungs, heart, those kind of things. The technology that these beings use is mean, and it's cruel, and it's against the law of one, and it's nasty. And the sad thing is, they don't care. They don't even care if it affects their own, as long as they don't lose too many head count. If the Treaty of Altair had stuck, they would have disengaged the programs and used those grids to run good programs that would have helped everybody to activate DNA. That was what they promised to do. Well, they broke their promises. This leaves indigos as the first ones to being very, very susceptible to health problems. It also leaves their astral fields more vulnerable than they should be. That's why it's even more important to realize the significance of the temporary Maharic seal, because you can continue to hold the astral body integrity with that. They're not broadcasting the ones that hit the fourth strand yet. They're only doing 1 and 2 right now. But it won't be long before they start with the fourth dimensional frequency. The Maharic seal will help to protect you from that. There's something that they want to do on the beach tonight that has to do with the Grail point, that there's a frequency that at least this group can pick up, and you can become transmitters of. Where you can just walk into a room and begin to transmit if you're willing. That will begin to block that. The Ki-Riche and the Kundalini combined, little nanosecond bursts of it through the DNA template. You couldn't sustain the whole thing here, the whole body blow up, the planet would blow up. That frequency can override and block in the physical body these effects. So we're going to be given a technique. This is absolutely brand new stuff. They just gave me this in the last 2 days. And they told me when we show up, and the people that show up on the beach will get that transmission, because they're the ones who are meant to be there. They're going to give a transmission of frequency, and we're going to be able to pick it up from the Grail point. From that point on, we'll be able to be carriers of it, and we can broadcast it at random, wherever we go. That will help other people block these manipulative frequencies. Now, sorry, the Ioni Council Indigo children are the first to be affected by this, by these bad programs running through the dyadic grids, the dyadic crystal grid. But it's not exclusive to them. It also will step down and affect everybody on the planet. It'll even affect their own. Not that they much care. It's going to create a situation where one of the things that happens is the immune system begins to crash, where the micro world that lives inside one's body and on one's body becomes much more of an enemy than a friend, because the natural balances between those microscopic communities and your own immune system, to not having them overpopulate and take over your body, that relationship is changed because of these programs. If these things aren't stopped between now and 2003, possibly, or possibly if they decide not to do certain things, we might get to 2005, there's going to be an increase in health problems. There's going to be the manifestation of new diseases and new viruses that antibiotics don't touch. There will also be an increase in the cancer rate and in the heart rates of people, the heart attack rates and those kind of things. It's an acceleration of the natural potential damage that could be done just from a natural stellar activation cycle if your DNA template can't handle it. It amplifies the heck out of it, and it does it on purpose. Because they would not surrender their control of it, nor would they fulfill their promise of giving back control of Stargates 4 and 5 to the Azarite Council, who was appointed by the Emerald Order Brenau as the universal security team until humans could take that role. That appointment was made, or restated really, 248,000 years ago. They've been for a very long time the races that served as the Stargate Guardians. Now, wait, I got incoming. I hate this when this happens. They tell me to redirect sometimes. They ask me to. There's something more important. Because they, all right, I'll go there. Because they wouldn't relinquish the control of the grid, the crystal grid, and the two Stargates like they had promised to do. There are two choices left by the Brenau and the Guardian Legions and the human race. They can sit by and ignore the problem and do non-intervention. They can just be nice, sweet, light, love, and we never do anything that might be perceived as aggressive. Or we can go in there and override their programs on Stargates 4 and 5 and disengage their grid and reprogram it to security coding, which would mean that dyadic grid can be turned not against them, but for planetary safety. Just as that grid can produce effects of devastating health problems and literally grid imbalances that create Earth pole shift, it can also be reprogrammed with good programs that actually amplify the natural stability levels in the grids. It's a matter of a technology that is benign. It's just who's using it and for what purpose that determines whether it's a good or bad technology. Part of what we've been asked to do, the people who care enough to try, is to engage, first of all, certain protective frequencies within our own bodies and begin to carry them and be transmitters of them. Because it'll take a little while before we can get to the point where we can get control of those two Stargates back under security coding and begin reprogramming the dyadic crystal grid. When we go to Kauai in May, there were several other objectives we were originally going there for, which had to do with releasing seals on certain gates. Stargate 6 was one of them, to get it prepared for certain positive things that were supposed to be given more information, more contact through it. Now, the focus of the Kauai trip has turned toward using the access point. There is an access point in Kauai that goes with Gate 6, where you can override Gate 4 and 5 and literally bring Gate 6 frequency through and begin that opening process. In Kauai, we're going to do that in order to break the Nibiruan Anunnaki hold on half of Stargate 5 and all of Stargate 4. Once that is done, then there's going to be another trip, and this one's small. They said only be a small group of people are going to be asked to go back to Peru in two places, Machu Picchu and Lake Titicaca, because there are two main access points there. That once we get those things under a security seal, to phase lock that security seal in the grids has to be done from the access points that are in Peru, because they connect to the planetary Templar in a way, we got into this in the Peru trip, where there's a direct connection between Machu Picchu, the Solar Gate, and Stargate 5. We have to reset the grids in Picchu and break the hold that they put back on them. Once we do that, then we are going to be able to help reprogram the Nibiruan dyadic crystal grid. They haven't told me when or where that's going to start, but before that can even happen, those grids have to be secured. We could go through probably 50 years of training to get all of the major, how this works, this works, this works, this works. And some people, like if you have looked at some of the material, they get pretty intense with detail. The detail's there. There's not a lot of time right now. We have till December of 2001 to get these things accomplished. And if they're not, it's time for Plan B, because there's nothing we'll be able to do at that point. There's a reason why there's nothing we'll be able to do at that point. For anybody that's read the Amente book, there was a date in there given of September 17th, 2001. That was when certain repairs on what's called the Alcyone spiral were going to be made. And the Alcyone spiral starts to connect to the fourth dimensional solar spiral that is already now connected to Earth. If Now, on September 17th, this event occurs. It will occur. But if at that point the grids are still under control of the Anunnaki forces, we will not be able to change that after that point. Now, we're going, hopefully, to Peru, the small group, in November, not September. Because if we try to do it before the fact, or too close to the fact, they just override it before it phase locked in the grids. So the date to get there is close enough to the time when that thing happens in September, before it fully phase locks. It takes a few months. We have to go in there, reset it with the Maharic seal and the frequency seals that we're going to put on Stargates 4 and 5. Reseal that there in Peru then. They won't have time to reverse it. It'll phase lock before that. We did the same thing in Egypt in a smaller way when we recoded some of those sites there and put them under Maharic seal right under their noses, and they really didn't like it at all. Yeah. It's basically, it really brings me a lot of sadness inside to say we're in an interdimensional war zone at the moment that we don't even know exists, most of us. But it's not something that's meant to make us afraid. It's something to make us wake up and realize that there's something we can do. There's a huge amount of history that goes with our race. If there's ever going to be a time that we reclaim our heritage as intended guardians and keepers of the planetary Templar complex and the interplanetary Templar complex, this is the time. Because if this doesn't go well, and the Anu legions know this, this was part of why they decided to take such a brazen act of actually standing against the Brennau at the moment. Part of the Emerald Covenant restatement of 248,000 years ago. In that, the Brennau agreed that since this was the third seeding of the human race on the planet, 2 seedings over millions and millions of years ended up falling flat and wiping out. How long was this going to go on? The Anunnaki legions and the Draconian legions both made a petition and said, fine, we'll enter the Emerald Covenant, but you need to agree that if this one doesn't work out, let's give it up already. Appoint one of the others as the guardians of the Interplanetary Templar. The Brennau were reluctant, but they saw their point. These weren't even the fallen legions. They were some of the other legions of the Brennau, saying, you know, this isn't working really well. Every time we put humans someplace, it turns into an absolute mess. This conflict between the Anunnaki and the humans is just going to blow up the system eventually. So there was a lot of side-taking and stuff, and there was a negotiation made that most of the Brennau orders, the Emerald Order was not particularly pleased with it, but they agreed to it to keep peace and try to see if we could move forward with everything. They agreed that if the third seeding of the human race on Earth failed, if it ended in cataclysm, and there were no survivors, they would not, A, restart it, and B, they would no longer protect Earth's territories from other races coming in and trying to do their own colonization programs. If the Anunnaki or the Draconians can wipe us out this time, they will not have retaliation from the Brennau orders because of their promise in the Emerald Covenant that they would release their hold on the territories and take a stance of non-intervention if humans couldn't wake up in the third seeding. This is why they had a vested interest in trying to take the Planetary Templar this time. They're so close to being able to decimate this race and end the Emerald Covenant where humans are concerned. That's a big thorn in the side, humans are, to the Anunnaki and the fallen Anu Elohim legions. They want their Anunnaki races to rule the Templar on the universal level in our time matrix. That was the real motivation why this whole little skirmish that started with Zetas coming in the 1920s and 30s turned into this absolutely massive mess of 4 harmonic universes paying attention to little old Earth down here all of a sudden. There's a lot at stake here. The people that can be reached enough, where it resonates with you, where you can feel some of the significance of what this means. This is why, if it gets really bad, the Brunel, are not going to allow us to be wiped out. If they have to take groups of us through into inner Earth and start recolonizing there, we're still alive. We're still kicking. The Emerald Covenant still stands. So that's why Plan B would be evac. There is no Plan C of non-intervention while there's a human from surface Earth breathing. So that's a good thing. In the meantime, we can have a really rough ride through the stellar activation cycle, or we can take a chance by doing a little bit of work that will possibly end in it not being a rough ride at all. It's not real likely that there won't be some rocky spots as far as the planetary grid stability goes, weather patterns go. They have told me for the last several years, and this is before I even knew what the word meant, because I don't study geography much. They kept telling me, Popo is going to go. What's Popo? Well, it's the name of a volcano I can't pronounce anymore. I've seen the spelling of it, but it's in Mexico. Before I even knew there was a volcano named Popo in Mexico, they told me that was the first site that is most vulnerable, and that the Earth scientists even know that. And so does the Mexican government, but they don't know what to do with the people, so they're just not releasing the data. Interestingly, in the last few weeks, I've noticed on TV, there's been more, of whatever it does, not full eruptions, but it like coughs and gasps and throws stuff out on people. It's been doing more of that lately. So there is potential here for some Earth changes. They don't have to be severe, but they will be severe if the work of the Guardian Legions isn't accomplished by the end of 2001. We can make a difference, and that's why they're giving us this information. And that's why I put my life, my career, my reputation, everything on the line. 90% of the population thinks I'm a crazy person. Saying, well, if this is crazy, I'd rather be this way, because at least I'm crazy and awake, We can begin with understanding a little bit about the planetary Templar complex. And this is where your graphs come in. There's a page called 50C. Looks like this. Okay. 50C. Now, pardon the handwritten stuff on top of it. That's stuff that's going to be typeset once it's in the book. And some people that were in Peru have seen this before, because these were some of the graphs used to explain things in Peru. Over on the left, we have something called the planetary shields. The shields, the word shields, refers to the scalar grid. It's a three-dimensional scalar grid. Now, shield 1 is Earth's shield. It's called the telluric shield. And it's composed of dimensions 1, 2, and 3 scalar grids. Shield 2 is in density 2. It's the Terran shield on the planet Terra. It's called the Duratic shield. Shield 3 is density 3, Gaia, dimensions 7, 8, and 9. And shield 4 is Aramatena, which was once used to be a liquid light planet, but is now just a repaired stargate with no planet around it. And that is dimensions 10, 11, and 12. The 4 planetary shields represent the scalar wave grids, all the way up through the densities, that connect this planet to its own Maharic template, or that 12th dimensional level. Just like a person can pull up the Maharic seal to protect their biofields, to protect their inner Templar from being invaded, their inner energy systems. This can be done on a planet as well. But what it requires, just like in a human, it requires 12 strands of DNA being activated to fully hold one. It would require all of the 12 what are called axiotonal lines, which are the core. They're not ley lines, they're deeper than ley lines, and they control more of the energy. There are 12 primary axiotonal lines on the planet, which correspond on the macrocosm of the planetary Templar to the 12 strands of DNA in the human genome. They work the same way. They bring in frequency. They have to activate in order to bring in frequency. If we can understand that there's these 4 planetary shields, And by progressively activating the scalar wave patterns in each one of them, we can progressively build a frequency seal around vortices 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 12. But if they try to do 12 right now, they blow the planet apart. It has to progressively, the grids have to progressively be able to handle it. What they can do now, and what is part of what's going to be done in Kauai, but it's not just Kauai. There's other teams that are needed to do stuff wherever they live. We'll get into that later. But we are going to build something called a Duratic Phase 1 seal, which is something that would normally happen on its own in a stellar activation cycle if all the gates were working the right way. What a Duratic Phase 1 seal means is the full fourth dimensional aspect of the planet activates. The Terran shield up there, the Duratic shield of Terra would activate, and it would begin to transmit directly into the grids and create literally a standing wave of frequency linking the time cycles of Earth to the time cycles of Terra. The Duratic Phase 1 seal is the only level of frequency seal that can be handled on the planetary basis right now without completely destroying the surface life, because the DNA has to be able to progressively expand to hold those frequencies. If you blow in a Maharic seal on a planetary level, you fry everything on the surface. So we're going to progressively assist in building temporary Maharic seals on the planet, which are just, it's like building a temporary one in your field. It'll last for a while, but it'll dissipate, and it doesn't override the field. It just assists the DNA template in the body. When you do a Maharic seal, it's not overloading your body by running D12 frequency all the way through it. It's giving little nanosecond bursts of frequency, D12 frequency subharmonics, enough to create the pillar in your field and enough to stimulate more rapid activation of your natural templates. On a planetary level, this is what a temporary Maharic seal would do. So there's two things that are going to be attempted here. One is the Duratic Phase 1 seal, which can be accelerated to do its natural thing, but more quickly. And the second is to reinforce that with a temporary planetary Maharic seal until the planet can fully hold those frequencies. It isn't that difficult to orchestrate, but understanding what the heck it is you're doing takes a lot of reading the material, because there's a lot of scalar grid mechanics involved. But if we can understand that there's those 4 shields over there on the right, and now it's on the right. When you're looking at it this way, it's on the left. Over here. The Duratic Phase 1 shield would be bringing up, you could look at it as like lines drawn up here, bring up a pillar of light from Earth's shield here up to not quite, about a third of the way up here. What that will do is block the fourth dimensional time cycles, first of all. If there's anything disharmonic coming in that can't hold a fifth dimensional level of consciousness, fifth strand activation, what it will do is block them from accessing Earth's portals. They'd fry if they came in. So if we put up Duratic Phase 1 seal, that's the first stage. That will do something very important, which is block something that, if we're not successful at the end of this year, there's a whole plan that they talk a little bit about in the Voyagers and Mente book, the 2003 dimensional blend experiment, where the Zetas are planning to bring in beam ships to do a frequency fence here. They can't bring in any of those ships. They need those ships to make full pole shift happen. They cannot bring them in if the fourth dimensional vortices are blocked and coded to a Duratic Phase 1 seal. That means they're secured under the Grail direction. They cannot access those time portals. They have to access those to bring those ships in. So that would be one thing it will help to do. Another thing it will help to do is it will help to do the same thing in the human DNA template. It will begin to create the natural, where when you do a temporary Maharic seal, you're only temporarily stimulating small subharmonics in the DNA strands. If you did a temporary Duratic seal in the human body, you'd be temporarily making small activations of the fourth DNA strand. So the fifth DNA strand could start to plug in and transmit its frequency down into three-dimensional awareness. But the natural process of activating your DNA is the process of activating strand 3, then strand 4, then strand 5, where you'd get a natural Duratic Phase 1 seal. By doing this in the planetary grids, it will give that protection of a Duratic Phase 1 seal within the human DNA template. It will help accelerate the activation of the fourth strand, so it plugs in more quickly to the fifth strand, which stimulates the immune system to work differently. So it will block a lot of the other things that they'll be trying to do here. There are a lot of parts to this plan. Some of the most important ones are realizing that certain things are going to happen here, and we don't have a choice in them, because the way things are going, there's a lot of choices being made about us and about this place that we haven't had a say in, we haven't even had the luxury of knowing about. Because of what happened with the Treaty of Altair, the Guardians have no choice. They can either turn their backs and walk away and mind their own business if we don't want them here, or they can show us what to do to begin changing the odds in this game. If we understand the basic 4 planetary shields and understand that our DNA, when it's activated to a certain level, has the ability to transmit frequency into those planetary shields that can progressively activate those shields to help create first the Dradic Phase 1 seal and then the temporary Maharic seal. The temporary Maharic seal would create a pillar of frequency right down from Stargate 12 all the way down to Earth. That's the ideal that they're aiming for. But you have to start somewhere, and we have to start with building this part, the Dradic Phase 1 seal. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about, I told you before you left here, you'd know what the words Maharata, Antakarana, Kirashe, and Kundure meant. We talked about the Kundure. Now, these all apply directly to here, because the frequencies that we're bringing in, the higher frequencies, so the higher dimensional spectrum, that's what these words refer to. The primal life force currents that run through, from source, run through the sound fields. There, those currents are called the Kundure, and there's 3 levels to them that go with the Akkadic blue, the the Akkadic, the polaric gold, and the triadic violet sound fields. That's the Kundure. Then, when you come down into the light fields, the primal light fields of the Brennel, that's called the Kirashe, and there are 3 levels to that as well. There is the blue, the violet, and the gold raised there. Life force currents come down. They break down and they polarize and become smaller. That's where we get our life force currents, our sound light currents, our electromagnetic currents down here. This is called the universal Kundalini, basically. We hear about Kundalini energies, about the base of the spine, the pineal gland, and the human bodies have Kundalini. Well, human bodies have it, but so does the planet. So when we get down to, we've got the 3 levels of the primal light fields of the Brennel and the Kirashe, then there's the level that corresponds with density 4, the Christos template, the hydroplasmic liquid silica light, which is the frequency that carries the omnipolar frequency of D12, the unifying frequency that brings particle and antiparticle together and allows it to transmute to the next highest level. It's the strongest healing current in the time matrix as far as what the lower densities can handle. The current of life force energies that emerges out of the Kirashe and comes down into D12 and then D11 and D10 of density 4 is called the Maharata. That's the word used to refer to that. Then, as density progresses down, the next density field that those life force currents have to come into are coming down into D9, D8, and D7, dimension 9, 8, and 7. At this point, we're dealing with what people generally refer to as Kundalini energy, rather than Kirashe or Kundure. Kirashe and Kundure mean primal, okay, the first currents that the others come out of. So we have the Maharata of density 4 frequency. Now, the word Antankarana, that's a mouthful, that's a word that pops up in a lot of the violet flame teachings, the good, the bad, and the awful. They all use that one. They usually don't explain a whole lot of what it's about, other than it's a pillar of light that comes down from God that takes you up to ascension, you know, because a lot of things with the twisted violet flame teachings is what they do, is they teach you stuff almost like a poem, but they leave out the details. What is that really? You know what I mean? They don't. The smaller currents, the 9-dimensional currents of the Antankarana. So when you see the word Antankarana, it refers to a life force current that comes from D9 down to D1. That's part, all of these are what are known as the universal Kundalini. So when we talk about our own Kundalini, which we'll do in tomorrow's workshop as the angelic human, because Kundalini is key These are the life force currents. There are ways of manually drawing in the life force currents into your body to release certain seals and activate more quickly certain DNA strand templates, if you know what you're doing. A lot of people try Kundalini activations and have really horrible experiences because they're doing it with distorted DNA strand templates. If you have distortions in the scalar patterns of your 12-strand template or your 9 strands and you try to bring down the Antankarana fully into the body, you're going to have all sorts of weird effects happening because you're going to hit where the energy can't come in because there's distortions in the scalar wave pattern, and it's going to create a reciprocal effect, making more and more and more distortions as the energy bounces around. Brings in too much energy that the body can't handle because the DNA template can't handle it. When we do Kundalini activations, we do them after people learn how to use the Maharic seal. Because one thing the Maharic seal, another thing it does, is it's like the reset button on the 12-strand DNA template. It's like a little bit slower way, but still effective, of giving yourself what's known as a Melchizedek ordination. You can also get the 12-strand pattern set. In case you were born without some of the strand templates, you can get it set by somebody transmitting it that has it through their biofield to yours. But it works a little more slowly, but by using the Maharic seal technique regularly, you can begin to reset that where you get your 12-strand pattern back. So even if you never run into a Melchizedek minister who's capable of transmitting initiation, you can initiate yourself. That's what the whole initiation system in the Melchizedek system is about. It's not about who's the head of what in a church or a temple. It's about levels of DNA activation and the levels of consciousness you can pull into the body because of that. So if you can understand that the life force currents that run through us, the Kundare, the Kirashe, the Maharata, Antankarana, all represent the universal Kundalini. They run through the planet. That's how they get to us. We're connected to the planet. The universal Kundalini comes down. Those currents come down if the planetary grids can hold it. Then it comes up through and into our bodies. That's where we get our life force current. There's a direct connection between them. When we're doing grid work, planetary shields clinics, which are different than people going around doing light and love and I don't know what I'm doing, meditations. I mean, their spirit is there, their heart is there, and hopefully they're getting guidance from the right people. Because a lot of the people that are being guided to go out and do Templar mechanics, you ask them, well, what about this planetary shield? You go, huh? What's a planetary shield? They don't know the mechanics, but they're being asked to run grid work. Guess why? This is what's so sad, because there are so many well-meaning people out there right now in the New Age movement. Their hearts are really into it. They're really trying to assist the evolution of all beings, the law of one. It means so much to them. And they're being played for fools because they're being taught to do things without knowing the mechanics so they can really see whether this is a good thing to do or not. And they're using their DNA templates to progressively mess up the grids. Not all of them. Some of them are in contact with guardian groups. And that's good. Or we might as well leave now. I tell you, if I was the only one in contact with guardian groups, I wouldn't be here. I'd just kind of surrender and say, get me out of here, please. Because there's nothing one person, just one person, can do. But anyway, I want you to understand, when you see those words or hear them in spiritual traditions, what they're connected to. You'll hear the word Antankarana dangled around like a free-floating form of art. It hangs there, but it's not connected to much of anything. It's something I obviously have or can have, or if God loves me, I get one. I mean, it depends on what Violet Ray teachings you're dealing with. Some give a little more explanation. Some tapping into the Kundalini. But there's nothing out there right now that tells the full story as it's recorded in the Cloister Duratura plates. This is part of the CDT plate teachings of how to run the Templar in your own body systems. So know when you see those words and words like that in spiritual teachings, what they're referring to, the primal life force currents and how they operate through the body. You build your Antankarana, that means you're progressively building the ability to activate 9 strands of your 12-strand template so you can bring in 9 dimensions of current through the body, which changes the whole metabolic rate and allows you to ascend up to density 3 if you're not being hijacked by a control matrix. The control matrices go up to D11. You might get yourself to D9, but who's giving you the techniques to get there, and where are you going to end up when you get there? This is why we're teaching the whole thing. because you don't need to latch into any other collective's field up there. You don't have to have a group of angels to make you ascend. You don't have to have a group of masters to help you ascend, who won't give you the details of how to do it yourself. If you understand the mechanics, the basic, simple mechanics, it's kind of like just understanding that, okay, toes are connected to feet, are connected to ankles, are connected to legs, are connected to knees, are connected to the body, are connected to my head, which makes it work. You get to see what's connected to what. So you can have some idea of what to do with your mind to direct your energy to get where you want to be, and not get where you think you want to be, but find out it's someplace else entirely. That's what's happening a lot in the New Age movement. They're using Kundalini mechanics. They're using scalar mechanics. They're not teaching you the word scalar mechanics. They're not teaching much mechanics at all. They're teaching meditations, and they're teaching basic things that make you feel really happy and really content on the outside, but they're making changes in your scalar template. And a lot of the time, it's to plug you in to one of their matrices. They can make you feel blissed out. I've seen some people in the New Age movement, God bless them, that are under very heavy Anunnaki implants. You can notice people that are under very heavy Anunnaki implanting because they walk around with almost a dazed, spacey, happy look all the time. Happy, joy. Everything is always fine. I don't need Maharic seals because I'm always safe because I'm a good person and God loves me. I open my heart to everyone and everything. Great, that means you're opening your astral field to everyone and everything. You know, these are the people that I don't even bother trying. I say, hello, God bless you. There's nothing you can say when your person gets in that space. That's like full saturation, where the mental body has been taken over. And they're imprinting the emotional body with bliss. You know, Prozac will give you bliss too. I mean, that doesn't mean it's good for your ascension, you know. So there's a lot of weird, wacky, nasty stuff going on out there. And honestly, from the highest levels of spiritual perspective, it is all in the game. But the game isn't fun when you're down here. We might all be eternal, but it can be really hell when you're down here and things are messing with you. And yes, it may teach us the lessons of empowering ourselves and learning to hold our own power. You'll get a lot of this out of the Anunnaki teachings too. Oh, well, if a bad thing happens, it's really just a lesson for us. Now, this is true. There is always a lesson, and we set that up for ourselves. That doesn't mean it feels good, and that doesn't mean there isn't an easier way to learn that lesson. They've taken it upon themselves to teach us lots of lessons, except most of the human race is allowing them to do it. So you can't blame the Anunnaki completely for what's happened here, because repeatedly human races have bought into trickery. Why? That's the thing to ask ourselves. How did we let this happen? They played dirty. They used some technologies that we didn't have. There was one reason in the nature of the high spiritual game that we allowed it to get this bad. All of us in this time matrix are learning about the lessons of love. And when we're in the highest spaces, all things are love, and you love all things no matter how bad they may behave. You might not like the behavior, but you always love the child, that kind of thing. We were exploring, the people who ended up on the victim side of this drama were exploring empowered love. You can love and still hold your power and not be walked on. The people who ended up in situations, the human race, that tried to be nice to everybody in the beginning until it got mutated, didn't know how to do tough love and how to say enough is enough. The buck stops here, excuse me. You're violating this over and over. Something needs to be done at this point. They can continually allow themselves, because they wanted to love and bond, because they wanted to fix everybody in the universe. Why? Because they were created to do that. It was learning to balance the truth of our creation contract. When do we intervene? When do we stop? And how much can we tolerate before we lose the ability to love? In a way, it's a test of our ability to be worthy of serving as guardians and keepers of the Templar complex. So on a high spiritual level, yeah, we all agreed to this. It's all in divine right order because the divine tries to right order everything in it anyway. But there are things that involve tough love that need to be done now, if we care. Simple energy work that'll help you accelerate your own DNA activation, which accelerates your spiritual integration process. Will protect your DNA. They'll help protect the planetary grids. You'll help protect anybody you're in contact with. You can walk into a room and transmit frequency. You will be a carrier of the Kunda ray. They call it the rainbow ray. And the Kunda ray are the sound currents, the inaudible sound currents from the Janus levels. Only indigo children have the ability to fully ground that. Other people can ground subharmonics of it, but they have to first do the ki rishe. We all have to first go through anchoring the Ankhtan Karana, which means bringing in at least the D9 subfrequencies. Then you have to go into the Maharata. Then you have to go into the ki rishe, and then you can run the Kunda ray. There are certain ways to accelerate that process. Two of the ways, well, it's one way, but there's two parts to it. We've already initiated. It's called, there are two master's level Kundalini activations, Kundalini awakenings, that release specific seals in the chakra system and in the Kundalini. The Kundalini in the body is controlled by something called craniosacral seals. There are frequency seals in the base of the spine and a corresponding set in the pineal gland in the center of the brain that regulate how much current and how much dimensional current runs through the main vertical current of the body, how much frequency you can pull into the body. The master's Kundalini activations begin the natural release. They accelerate by stimulating manually the seals to begin the natural release of the seals, the craniosacral seals, which allows you to progressively bring in a bit more of the Ankhtan Karana first, the interdimensional currents that go up to D9. That stimulates the DNA template. That stimulates release of the next set of seals. So it sets in motion a process that the full 12-strand DNA template will be stimulated into idle activation all at one time. Oh, well, in two pieces, actually. There's two parts to this. The first part will stimulate the base code parts, which are the magnetic codes in the 12 strands, and the other part will stimulate the overtone electrical codes. Now, you're not going to have your DNA activated to 12 all at once. What it does is set the template in motion enough to allow nanosecond bursts of D12 frequency, and higher if you're an indigo, to be broadcast into and through your system to accelerate your own process and also to affect the planetary grids and things like that. So part of what the Guardians have brought in or given us to work with, well, they've given one part so far. The next part's going to be revealed for the trip to Kauai. They haven't even told me how to do it yet. The first one was called the Emerald Awakening, and it involved releasing the fourth star crystal seal, it's called, in the heart chakra, and opening the Grail point in the body, the Holy Grail point in the base of the spine, to begin activation of all the 12 base tone codes in the 12-strand pattern. Because if you're an indigo and you want to get your 48 or your 36 or whatever strands you have activated, you have to start with 12. You need to start with those. So we have the Master's Kundalini stuff going, along with the Kathara programs going, along with the Tangible Structure of the Soul programs going. Each one of these helps to create a different level of activation. They're all synchronized with each other. These guys know what they're doing. And it will help your own process, but it'll help us to make a difference here. Now, the difference we need to make isn't that difficult. I made a list of the most important things to talk about because I could go on till midnight, and I don't think we're all up to that. Okay. We are being asked to help set the Daretic Phase 1 seal. That's going to happen probably with or without our help, as long as a couple members of the Amente security team actually participated to anchor those frequencies. The Daretic Phase 1 seal isn't a big amount of frequency coming in, but in terms of what it's going to do, it has a big effect. I want to talk about the twinning event a little bit, because that's the big mystery of what is the twinning. When the absolutely necessary grid mechanics of taking back Stargate 4 and 5 by overriding them with Stargate 6, when that event occurs, and if that event does not occur, this place is going into pole shift. And it's not a joke, and it's not a scare tactic. It's a simple fact of what's happening with the politics and the planetary physics. So when that endeavor is done, and we will get control of gates 4 and 5 back, and they know we will. They're not happy about it. It's going to do something to the planetary grids. It's going to accelerate them. They wouldn't normally go into that level of acceleration until about 2005. If we remember that the DNA template of humans is directly connected to the grids, and if the strand templates are distorted, if this planet is going to begin running D5 frequency several years ahead of time, it's going to cause a problem for most people on the planet. The indigos, if it wasn't for the nasty programs being sent through the dyadic crystals, if it wasn't for that, indigos would be able to adapt because they have the ability, because of their higher strands, to activate the lower ones a little faster. If the Doradic seal and activation of Stargate 6 was initiated and just left at that, it would kill most people on the planet. It would create total deterioration over a few years of the immune system and all the body systems, because the body could not hold that amount of frequency that rapidly. Now, if the Guardians are going to intervene and try to get the place back, they're not going to do it and then let everybody get wiped out anyway. They wouldn't do it unless there was something that could be done about that. And this is where the twinning event comes in. We'll talk more about the details of the twinning, because it's kind of complicated, tomorrow. The twinning comes down to a very personal reality that some people know about and most people don't. That when we incarnate from the higher levels, from density 2, when we come down into density 1, we come in something called a 12 clock, or a cycle of 12 simultaneous incarnations placed in various different time vectors within the same Earth cycle, different time periods, but in the same cycle. We come in with something called a twin, a gender twin, which is ourself, but in the opposite gender of what we are here. Now, most people, unless you happen to be indigos, I'll tell you about most people first. Most people come in with their gender twin, but they don't run in one given lifetime. They will not run into their gender twin in every lifetime. Only in the last lifetime before ascension. They will meet their gender twin, and they're like those, sometimes they're those like love at first sight, just, fall in love. You see, once in a while, you see these couples that have this really special weird thing. They're just really together. And even when they can fight and be mad at each other, but there's still this love bond between them. You can feel it. This is indicative of gender twin, natural gender twin relationships. Gender twin relationships are very special. Now, some people's gender twins pass on before they do, and they'd be like in D4 in between lifetimes and not on planet. There's a lot of variations on this. But when we come in as regular human beings with 12-strand patterns, we have our gender twin that we would naturally meet at the end of our cycle of 12, where we'd come together and then we would merge. And usually they end up as romantic couples, because when you combined, there's a lot of people don't realize, sexuality is about combining Kundalini coding and DNA coding. When you unite with someone, you are taking on part of their codes, and they're taking on part of your codes as far as the template scalar wave patterns. With gender twins, the progressive coming together as, well, it was originally the divine coupling. The married couple really kind of symbolized that. They were stimulating rapid activation of each other's gene codes. So they would progressively and synchronistically be able to work their way into ascension together. And they would ascend together and end up in density 2 cycles, or higher if they had higher coding. That was a natural way it was supposed to work. With indigos, it's even more fun. I'm going to part of this, but not all of it, because it gets really wild. But with indigos, in every vector, they come in with a gender twin. There's a gender twin for every indigo in its own time vector. So they're gender twin pairs, right? Not only do they have the one there in that time vector, they have another set in the inner Earth time vector at the same time, and another set on the parallel Earth time vector. There's that extra inner Earth set of manifestations that goes with the indigo imprint. That's the Iani Council that regular 12-strand DNA humans don't have to deal with. The twinning event goes back to the Nibiruan dyadic crystal grid. This is one of the nastiest things that was done to this race. Actually, they told me, to me it was one of the nastiest I've heard of. That means there's a lot more, because they said this was one of the minor things they did to us. Because the incarnational cycles on this planet are, as far as incarnating on the planet, there's a whole set of mathematical relationships that takes place to do that. We come in with our twins, and if the Earth cycles are working normally, we meet our twins at the end of our 12 cycle and then ascend for regular humans. What they did with the dyadic crystal grid was throw codes in that mismatched and scrambled the timelines just enough where gender twins could not come together. That kept everybody trapped down here. Because if you don't merge with the coding of your gender twin, either here or on the astral, you don't get the final activation where you both become one again to get up to the next level. That's one of the ways they entrapped human souls here, is scrambling the timelines in Earth's grids so the natural gender twin cycles would not come together. And what they did instead was they tried to pair up humans with Anunnaki to continually hybridize, progressively trying to hybridize us out of our 12-strand potential. With the Eoni Council, it had the same effect. But the thing with the Eoni Council is, being an indigo child has some special features. Not only do you not just have 12 strands, you have anywhere from 24 to 48 strands. Now with the human imprint, the simple 12-strand imprint, the DNA templates of the gender twins polarize from D12, well, from this low subharmonics of D12 down, which gives a real separation of individuality feeling between the gender twins with just human form. With the indigo imprint, the Eoni Council imprint, there's polarization in the strands only from D6 down. There's full bonding and total mirroring of the templates of the DNA from strands 7 and up. It creates a not quite full separation from each other that allows them to anchor the Kundalini and the Kirashe and other things that if you're totally separated into polarity, you can't. It also creates, when you separate gender twins, a very, very deep pain inside, a biologically felt ache that doesn't go away. If the other is not where it's supposed to be, it can be felt. We've been living under that since 22,500 BC. What is happening now is very special. They're running the frequencies through the grids, and it begins tonight for those who will come, and it ends on January 1st. That will begin to reprogram some of the scrambled timelines. Just enough, and we can do this now, and we'll phase lock it in Kauai. It's going to start putting those natural time cycles back together, de-scrambling the scrambled timelines, which are going to allow the gender twins to come back into each other's vector. But more than that, it's going to accelerate the process. So even humans that are not in an indigo body, that normally wouldn't, because it's not necessarily their last incarnation here, they wouldn't meet them, they're going to accelerate the lines where they will. If their gender twins aren't here and are in the, have crossed over, they will arrange astral interaction with them. If they don't want to have a relationship with their gender twin who is out here, they will still arrange astral field bonding between them. If people are open to the gender twin thing, first of all, you may actually be with yours. There are some people, particularly indigos, who manage to come through and get through and move through the scramble in the timelines where they actually found their gender twin. So if you're part of a married couple and it's a good thing happening, there's a good chance you may have already found yours as an Eoni Council. That will amplify and get stronger. And whatever bond you have, they told me it'll go this way. There'll be a little clearing of conflict stuff from old patterns, and then there will be an even stronger bond than was ever there before, if you have your twin with you. If you don't, you're one of those rocky relationships that you just know, it's all right for now, but I really have a feeling I'm not supposed to be here forever. It may be the fact that you're still paired with an Anunnaki or a Draconian that you don't belong with. They don't belong with you any more than you belong with them. They can't ascend either that way. Okay? The grids are going to do this on a mass level. They're going to reorder the timelines to start bringing the gender twins back together, both in the Eoni councils and in the general human populations. It's going to cause some chaos, I imagine, in marriages and things that aren't real good. If you're not really with the person you're supposed to be with, you're going to find out fast, probably, because it'll kick up all of this stuff that is disharmonic between you. But if you have, now gender twins, this is where the harmonic versus not harmonic comes into. Gender twins share the same DNA template, one spliced into the magnetic, base magnetic, where it's more drawing frequency, which would be female, and the other being its replicate in the base electrical, which would be the male body form. So it's literally, there are men and women on this planet whose DNA templates, the codings and the templates beneath the manifest strands, and which is reflected in the manifest strands, actually have total compatibility. Others have some compatibility. Some have no compatibility. This is where it's kind of funny. You watch science trying to figure out, where does human attraction drive come from? Maybe it's pheromones, Well, pheromones may have a part in the process, but it doesn't start there. Attraction to each other has always been about the DNA template. Our intimate relationships have always been about ascension. And that truth was denied us because of the manipulation that's been here since 22,500 BC and before, some of it. There are some people who will have connection with their gender twin on the astral levels. There are some who will meet them physically and some who are already with them. The reason it's being done is because when you bring gender twins together and begin the fusion of their DNA strand templates, they can hold in each of their bodies 3 times as much energy as either could hold alone. So if they're going to amplify the grid speed to the point where it would basically biologically kill everybody because their bodies can't hold enough frequency, you pair them up with a buddy that has matching DNA template, and you can hold 3 times the amount of frequency, which A, creates immunity to the grid acceleration, and B, makes you a very powerful resource, if you so choose to serve that way, to anchor higher dimensional Merkaba vehicles. If you're a small gender twin coupling or it's just the person from this cycle that you were intended to meet, you'll be able to anchor what's called a holophase Merkaba, which is a 6-dimensional Merkaba. A Merkaba is basically an electromagnetic field in the shape of a star tetrahedron that at its core has something called a form constant space. It's a space, a spherical space that forms inside of these electromagnetic currents, spiraling, counter-rotating electromagnetic currents in the form of a star tetrahedron, that creates reality fields. When you create your Merkaba vehicle, you're literally activating things in the body that create this spherical form constant light bubble around you in your auric field that allows you to pass through stargates without frying. Now, when you bring gender twin couples together, they have the ability to rapidly activate their own Merkaba, accelerating their own DNA strand template activation and such. But they have the ability to start bringing in the frequencies depending on what their particular coding. Indigos, you put gender twin indigos together, they can anchor the Kundalini, parts of it anyway, depending on if you have 48 codes, you can anchor the whole darn thing times 3. Not just times 1. So people who come together, particularly the Eoni Council, who have that ability to anchor alone, they can anchor the Kundalini. You put them together with their gender twin, they can anchor 3 times the amount of Kundalini frequency. Kundalini frequency coming into the planetary grids will allow something besides not getting fried on a biological level, as far as your twin, being with your gender twin will help this. You may find them popping up in your life. And it starts in January 1st it starts. And it's going to move rapidly, I think, because the time is so short, but to the end of the year that we need to get some of this stuff accomplished. But gender twins who are aware that that's what's happening are going to be asked if they're willing to create something called safe zones. Where, and it's funny, you don't have to be an intimate couple. You may find your gender twin, and you may be in a relationship that you really value. That will be respected, though you may find yourself compelled to really needing to find a way to work it out. Because there's a real strong biological draw, usually, between gender twins. It's just, really there. Which they're trying to repress right now with those crystal grids that we're going to reprogram. But we're going to be asked to come in and anchor Merkaba fields by running the Maharic seal together, and then with groups, if we can get groups of people that want to do it. And you don't have to tell them what it's all about. Oh, we're just do the light, love, and clueless stuff, Oh, we're just going to do planetary meditation. It's called the Maharic seal. Let's do this. Hey, they're tricking people all the time, They don't give them all the details. Well, we don't have to give them all the details either. We can get some of those people who are being sucked into the Anunnaki manipulation movements and find the common vibration, light and love, yes. Then there's awareness and cluelessness. Let's leave those out of the game for a while. Say, great, there's this Maharic seal technique, really helps to amplify your 12-strand activation, because some of them know about the 12-strand pattern. They know nothing about how it really works. And you can get them to do planetary healing meditations. It helps them to break the control matrix link so they can get into their own Christos template. And meanwhile, it helps you to collect more people to bring more frequency of the Kundalini through. We're going to be asked to set up rainbow web circles, which are anchoring the Kundalini circles. They're not hard to run. There's going to be a procedure they give us tonight that's going to be a bit specialized. And then before you leave, there's going to be a 4-step procedure that uses the amplified energies of the Grail point, a quarter mile off the coast of Siesta Key, for remote access, where you can do it yourself and begin to bring it into your area. People of similar like mind. You don't have to tell them. I wouldn't even attempt, really, to try to tell people what this is about. There are so many levels to this knowledge. It sounds like nuts if you don't have the pieces and how they fit together. But you can at least tell people that this is stuff that helps in planetary healing. Are you interested? Let them feel it out. If they're being very heavily impulsed by either the Anunnaki or the Draconians, they'll feel weird about it. It'll make them very nervous. Implants and Maharic seals tend to not resonate real well together. But if they have a little bit of implanting, but they're not fully wired yet, and they're not being really messed with because the negative ones don't see them as particularly useful right then, they'll play. Because they're human beings here that really want to help the planet. They're just being misguided on how to do it. So if you can bring this in, what we'll do is, because your biofields, because the extra transmissions, if you want to come tonight and get those to activate, begin activation of the Kundalini in the body, you will be able to, first of all, it'll accelerate your gender twin thing happening. It'll accelerate the process of those vectors coming together where you trip over each other. Secondly, you'll be able to begin creating safe zones on the planet. This is also needed if we're going to activate Stargate 6 to reclaim Stargates 4 and 5 and get them back under burnout protection. The planet needs to be able to handle that frequency, not just the human gene code. If we can build Merkaba sites, which are, we run the Maharic seal, and there's going to be a certain technique that they give us to do this that will be in writing before you leave. It creates a safe zone site where it creates a space. It'll create a Hala phase Merkaba, which is a 6-dimensional Merkaba. That's a plug for 6-dimensional frequency from the Stargates to come in and synthesize through so it doesn't hit the grids and just start creating chaos. We need to help create Merkaba safe zones. There are also zones that, within them, they create a form constant within their area. And they'll be getting a lot more information on this as we go along. But this is the basic concept of what they're wanting us to do if we're willing to help. Wherever we are, we can learn to run the technique just to anchor and say, okay, yeah, I'll anchor one here. Anywhere you want. Every step I take, let me anchor one. Go ahead. You can have fun with this. It helps your system, because every time you assist in anchoring a Merkaba, it assists in accelerating a bit of your own DNA template and your own spiritual integration process. But these safe zones are going to be areas on the planetary grids that are sealed First they have the plug for the D6 frequency, the hollow Merkaba. And then you're going to run a Maharic seal, which will become part of a temporary Maharic seal. They will be areas on the planet that are safe, where people can go and receive clear communication that's not intercepted and twisted by the Anunnaki or the Draconians. If they want to do higher self-channeling, if they're in those spaces, they'll be able to get through. Right now what's happening is there's not very many safe zones on the planet. So every time the higher self of a person tries to communicate, the Anunnaki are intercepting, pretending they're God, pretending they're this angel, pretending they're that angel, and misleading people. They're blocking their own ability to communicate with their own soul matrix and their own avatar level. That's not very nice. Safe zones will give people spaces that won't happen in. They're also very important to creating grid stability, so the tectonic plates don't start to crack when all this frequency hits. Popo may go sooner than the scientists think. Maybe it won't. Maybe this tape should be sent to Mexico. They haven't said much about that, and I asked because I had a little just rumbling feeling one day when there was a show on about it, and just basic National Geographic type show, and I was like, I don't know, are you sure that's not going? They didn't give me any comment on that. They said Japan is about next on the grids. If those things are going to happen, hopefully they can be prevented. I get a feeling Popo can't be. I think it's beyond the point of return. But as far as Japan and other horrendous things that could possibly happen, they can possibly be prevented. If we can create enough rainbow web sites or Merkaba anchoring sites, we have a chance of keeping the grids balanced enough where it doesn't start whacking out the weather patterns and the tectonic movement and all of that. And one of the most important aspects of this is we're being asked to, if we choose to participate in the rainbow web circles, to keep for ourselves a list of every place you ran a Merkaba. Because if it goes bad, they're going to be the only places that the Guardian Legions can reach us to get us out of here. There will be evac pickup sites if it gets that bad. Hopefully it won't be. But that's why we're being asked to, when we run them, keep track of where they are. Because there will be the places. If you start seeing stuff happening and you get guidance of your own, from your own self, that it's getting bad, and you see political stuff, and you see World War III breaking out or something like that. If World War III happens, or we start to go into that drama, that is a sign that Plan B is in operation. If it gets that far, there's nothing we can do. And that's when the people whose DNA can pass through into inner Earth, portals, will be taken into inner Earth, because that's the closest frequency to this one. Now, that would require a 4.5 DNA strand activation. For an average human, that might be a little challenging in a short period of time. But for an indigo, what's going to happen is something interesting. When we activate the D6 frequency of the Stargate and it starts coming into the grids, it stimulates the already idling 6th strand of the indigo template. They come in with the 6th DNA strand active but not plugged into the rest, and it runs the frequency right down and activates 4 and 5 very quickly. Indigos will be able to go out through the Sirius B gate, the D6 gate. That gives them a little bit more leeway. Humans that have 12-strand templates have to get their template up to 4.5, what's called accretion level or activation level, to be able to be evac'd into inner Earth. So, in the meantime, the Guardians have given us the Cathara Biospiritual Healing System, the Tangible Structure of the Soul program, all these programs that are meant to activate Kundalini, activate DNA, integrate spirituality. Why? Because if we have to evac people, it would be helpful to be able to get their bodies out of the portals. It's a big plan. When I looked at this, after coming back from England, and they kind of dumped all this on me very quickly, and I said, oh my God, I don't want to be here. Can I go home now? One of the things I didn't want to do was teach this stuff. How am I going to tell people this stuff? The picture's so huge and so complex. I'm doing everything my little brain can do to wrap my brain around it and understand what I have to do next and what does this mean to me. So how am I going to teach this to people? And who's even going to listen to me? You know? And they said one thing to me: the security team will hear you. So I said, okay, I'll do this workshop. But you know what was amazing? I was nervous about this one. Tomorrow's will be easy because it's angelic human stuff, and everybody likes to hear about their angel nature and that kind of stuff. This was the one on agendas and on some turns of events that are not very positive right now that we can make a big difference in. But it was really, I was really thinking, you know, I hope the people that come to this are really the people that are supposed to be there. Yeah. Because otherwise, they're going to think I'm absolutely nuts out, whack out, forget it. They're not going to hear me. They're not going to listen. The energy's going to be really icky in the room. You know what I mean? I was not wanting one of those situations to happen. But I should know by now that every time they say who's supposed to show up will, it happens. This group has been wonderful with this level of data. I've been transmitting on a D8 frequency, by the way, if anybody feels energy in the room. Usually, we start with like a just general public group. We start with D4 frequency information and the transmission of energy that goes under it to carry the information, right? Which puts the information into like the 4th strand range. And the mental body and the astral body can pick it up and start to understand it. This one climbed very rapidly from started at D5 and went right up through. Usually we stop at D7. This went into a D8 frequency. That's when I start to get like I talk fast and my lips dry out and that kind of thing. There's, I think, a couple more just little points that I want to talk about. I know this is, I've hit you with a lot of information.
Area is considered a safe zone.
Okay, this depends. And I asked them that, and they said they can't give me a specific, okay, you sit down, you do this work, and you're going to create X amount of, space, maybe 2 feet, 3 feet, 5 miles, what is it, right? It depends on who's doing it, how many people are there, and what activation level their DNA is at while they're doing it, okay? So some people, you'll be able to tell if you're making a big one. Once you start to do them, you'll get a feel for, well, that was a little one. There was a little Merkaba. Or all of a sudden, oh, where'd that energy come from? I can feel that. You can just feel this spread that seems to like go out way beyond you as if it's like going out for miles. Sometimes that will happen. Yeah.
And the second part is what type of areas are recommended?
Any area you feel drawn or guided to. They don't suggest right now, until we get rid of the Nibiru grid problem, the diotic crystal grid, they do not suggest going into areas that you absolutely know are horrible. You just know certain areas have really bad energy and something negative must be messing with them. Don't start there. That's a big major problem, has been for quite a while.
How about Thunder Mountain in Sedona?
Oh dear, Sedona.
No.
Yeah. I've been doing Merkabas every day for a month there.
Good. Let me ask on that particular site.
Thunder Mountain.
This was specifically for you. I just got guidance on that one that said, you can do that there, but do not do it without a team of 6 or more people. As far as the strength of the field that you would need to build, you'll expose yourself to potential harm if you try to do it by yourself. Okay? Yeah.
Wait, so
They really are? I
Yeah.
hear all that stuff, I just don't pay a lot of attention.
Yeah, I try not to get into that stuff, because there's enough negative stuff. I have to drop enough of scary bombs on people. I hate doing that. I'd rather be light, love, and clueless, but it doesn't get you very far. But as far as the Sedona area, they said because that area has been, for the last number of years, infiltrated by Draconians, and now Draconians are pairing up with Anunnaki, it's going to get worse. Teams of 6 or more. You can have one leader that knows really what's going on, and 5 people that will help you just do a nice meditation. Yeah, that kind of thing. It works wonders. I know, that's how the Anunnaki hijacked half the people in the New Age movement. Okay, you had a question, yes?
Yeah. You spoke about the Council of 9.
Yeah.
Who are the Council of 12? And also, when we get these transmissions tonight, can we also pass that transmission on to, like my mate, who's also part of this group, but she's just not here today?
You can, they're telling me that you can ask them to help you do that. Okay. But until you do certain levels of Kundalini activation, to bring it in all by yourself is going to be difficult. That's why they're helping with the transmissions right now. I do that sometimes in a room where I know how to activate my Maharic shield, and I can feel it underneath my feet, and I can feel the energy pumping. And I just teach somebody, like a group, Maharic shield, And I can watch with, I look with the inner vision and watch their Maharic shields, and some of them kind of go, and they try to pop up, and others just can't activate. So I kind of just send a nice run of frequency under the room just to stimulate them to come up. They will do the same type of thing to help us with the Kundere and the Kirashe energies.
Right.
But yes, you can pass it on with your mate. In fact, one of the strongest ways to pass on activations is in the combining, when mates combined, because your field's open to each other.
Right.
Okay? This has been a tactic that's been being used to mess up the DNA code of a lot of the Iani Council that aren't awakened yet. They're trying to pair them with Draconians, or they're trying to pair them with Anunnaki. And the sad thing is, the people that have the Draconian and Anunnaki codes don't know it. Their matrices don't tell them that. They just think they're regular humans like anybody else. But they happen to be used, they guide them into relationships, just when indigos are trying to awaken, usually. And they try to hijack them. And if they get them involved sexually and get those fields open, they start to contaminate the indigo's DNA template. All right, so this has been going on all through the New Age movement, but it's been going on all through human history since at least 22,500 BC, actually, but it's been upstepped lately. So yes, you can use that principle in reverse for good things. You can bring the frequencies, Maharic frequencies, into your field and pass them on to your mates or to your lovers. You can even pass them on to a smaller degree in a hug to someone. But you always ask first. If you can't ask them directly because you have to explain a billion things they're not going to understand, put out a call to their own avatar level and say, is it okay if I do this? Because you don't put anything in anybody's field without asking permission. And if they can't answer you here because they don't have the knowledge base to where your words are going to make sense, you do have the right to, from your avatar level, bring in that silver level of yourself, that pale silver avatar self, and ask your avatar level to ask their avatar level if it is all right that you bring this frequency to them. And you'll get a feeling. I mean, if you have direct, open communication, you'll get a yes or no, or maybe, or not today, maybe next week. But if it's a no at that moment, you'll get a feeling, not right to do right now. There's something that doesn't feel right, that I get a feeling that I'm not supposed to. But usually, the answer will be yes, unless they're not ready to hold whatever frequency. Okay? So you can use the regular twinning effect to help. Think about the twinning for a while, though, and how neat. Because I don't want everybody to leave here on, oh my God, it's that bad. Yuck. We have all this work to do, and how dare they do that? They're not very nice. That's not a good vibe to send people away on, and I don't want to do that. There's one aspect of this that is very, very joyful, and that has to do with the twinning. Be it your twin, your gender twin, or the closest match they can possibly find. Once in a while you'll have a gender twin that's off someplace else, like literally in another universe, that is not going to be able to bring it through, but that's not too many, but some are like that. You will still be assigned with a buddy, either in the astral, if that's where you want it, or in the physical. They'll bring someone into your life that you have the closest DNA template match to. What that means is, you know how men and women tend to just have this thing sometimes, or they have a real hard time understanding each other, this like gender barrier thing? That is very, very much less, particularly in indigo children, gender twinnings, or even close matches. So that's something to look forward to. There is one more thing, I'm glad I came back to this, that I didn't say, that I need to say. When we're talking about the astral, we're talking about the astral plane, or the D4 level, where you can take your astral body, and there's a lot of people, it's getting really popular in the New Age movement to have all these wonderful astral affairs with beings from all over the place. I met a lady who likes to sleep with Dracos because they're really good in bed. That's what she talks about. Astral relationships with draconian hybrids, great. There's others that are really, really very enamored by the pretty, pretty Palladian Nibiruans, who look so angelic, and they're usually gorgeous. Well, at least that's how they present themselves. Once upon a time, astral affairs were fine. When you're in a time like this, they're the most dangerous thing you can do. When you're sent, if you're not going to have, if you end up for some reason that your gender twin is not in a physical body, or you just aren't open to having that quite in the physical, where you'd be more comfortable with an astral relationship, there's one thing that will not, absolutely not, be occurring in the astral relationships. They will not turn into what feel like and look like sexual affairs there. They may end up here as sexual bonding and committed relationships and things. But because right now the tactic of sending in wonderful astral lovers to seduce humans is being used by both Draconian and Anunnaki forces for one reason. You take your astral body out, you go and have an affair, it's the same darn thing as linking your fields sexually here with someone here. They're doing code saturation of the DNA template, and people are falling for it. There's articles popping up even in like the Inquirer and the Sun papers now about beautiful aliens coming and having romantic affairs with humans, you know, and taking them out of body and all this. This is even hitting like the Sun now. You know, when you look at the Sun type tabloids, these are the ones that tell you little info bites on what's really going on, but it's all presented as fiction, of course. No, everybody knows you don't believe those stories, right? Be aware that even though the tactic used to be used in the ancient of days when it was safe to use it, where when your gender twin would meet you on the astral, you could have intimacy there that could even hit levels that the physical body couldn't even attain. That will not be used by guardians from this point forth, because there's other ways to bond the fields that do not engage the full, you know, what appears to be sexual interaction on D4. There are ways to naturally bond the fields, and your gender twin and you will be able to do that, where somebody infiltrating your field would have to do different types of infiltration to try to get in, because they don't have the DNA compatibility. But if they can get you to willingly open your fields by having astral sexual encounter, easy, got one. You know, it's being used all the time. So I just want you to know that I've said there may be gender twins approaching you in the astral level, or guides or something approaching you telling you about gender twins. If any of them that appear to you or come to you in the astral try to get you into a sexual astral liaison, reject it immediately. If it's your gender twin, it won't do it that way, and it won't go into that, just so you won't be tricked. Okay? It's important.
Is the twin flame the same kind of words that are used?
Yeah, twin flame, but that's also an abused word. It's used and abused in the New Age movement. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. In tomorrow's workshop, we're dealing with the angelic human lineage, which gets into the personal level of stuff. It gets into how you incarnate here, your incarnational 12 cycles, your simultaneous 1,728 different simultaneous selves that are running around in the time matrix. It gets into all of that. So we'll understand more of those things when we get into that level. Okay, so I just wanted to leave you with that. You know, be careful of astral seduction and enjoy the fact that for the first time, we're going to be brought into the ability to have relationship with people who have very, very similar DNA templates to ours, where the level of love, bonding, understanding, support, friendship, all those things that can be so terribly missing sometimes in relationships. On a mass level, this is going to start to happen. It's going to do wonderful things for the vibration of love, and it's going to build lots of Merkabas as well. Okay, so it may do quite a few of those too.
That's the second part of my question.
By the way, gender twin couples make very powerful little avatar babies usually. Yeah, some form or another. You know?
The second part of my question. You had talked about the Council of 9.
Yeah.
Who was the Council of 12?
There's about 4 different groups I've heard that go by that handle.
Yeah, are they light, or are they also...
They're part of the group that gets into the Council of 9, Council of 12 stuff. But from what I've heard, as far as it stands, it's part of the groups that are trying not to affiliate with that. They're trying to, you know, like break out, even though they're some of the same race members, they're trying to side with the Emerald Covenant. It looks like it's going to work that way, but the verdict's not out on the Council of 12. Yeah, they haven't told me yet whether that's decided. Now, when they tell me, when they won't tell me whether it's decided or not, means it's still an indecision. That happened with the Thoth Matrix recently. That's one thing more I just want to say. With the Thoth Matrix, Thoth was supporting the Emerald Covenant up until September. The Thoth material that came out before that was actually here to assist us and help us, because he'd made the conversion back, and he made a commitment to that in 1992 with the agreements that were made then. This time, we were very much hoping. It's funny, though. The Isis Matrix, which is a group of consciousness that's very closely associated, that came over. They stuck with the Emerald Covenant. The Thoth Matrix was in decision for quite a while, and it finally decided that it was going to support the Anunnaki agenda, because it was very tired of the whole game, and it would at least probably end the Emerald Covenant where humans were concerned, to just get it done. So I feel bad because I knew the being called Thoth in other incarnations. He got himself in a lot of trouble, and he could be a real SOB when he wanted to. But at heart, there was a being who truly wanted to fix himself, fix his race, and fix things. He just got himself all stumbled up and twisted sometimes. And he could be very nasty sometimes when he was anti-something. That's something you're not going to hear from the people who are teaching Thoth's material now. Thoth will often appear not only as an older man, sometimes he appears as about a 30-year-old Anunnaki with black hair, quite attractive, quite human-looking, with the classic kind of Anunnaki nose, which is, quite a handsome guy. He's been trying to do astral affairs with people recently. And this is going to get me in a huge amount of trouble with the Thoth people. You know that, don't you? You know, they'll hate Adahayes forever. But that's all right. I'm here to tell the truth. People can take it or leave it. They can ignore it. I don't care what they do. But I remember enough to know I'm not just passing on gossip. So, anyway, yeah. There's probably councils of every number you can imagine. The concept of using councils is becoming very popular. Originally it meant certain things, but now the New Age movement is playing on that. You have councils of all sorts. The Council of Five, I think, has something to do with a Palladian matrix that's kind of in between, but it's going over to the light. It's not a negative Palladian matrix. It's more a Ceres human, which would be Seraphim human Palladian matrix, that has fifth strand activation. It's not 5 people, but they're operating on the 5th strand activation level in the Terran time cycles. They're affiliated with Terra, I believe is where the Council of Five stuff is coming from. Yeah. Anyway, I'll let y'all go. A lot of people these days that are getting their own spiritual call to become a part of assisting this planet through its growth and through its evolution. We're in the middle, or the beginning actually, of a very, very special time period. And right now, the people that are incarnate on this planet everybody came in with soul contracts of some sort. Everybody's here for a reason. And when you come into what's called fetal integration, you lose memory of who you are and why you came. The gene code does that. As soon as your consciousness intersects with a DNA template, the DNA template is only activated on a 3-dimensional level right now. First 3 strands are actually activated. Science has discovered 2. There's actually 3 strands. We get 3-dimensional perception from that. But the human imprint is a 12-strand DNA pattern. Before we incarnated, we had those 12 dimensions of consciousness and more available to us. But you come into a baby's body, and all of a sudden the gene code blocks out the rest of the 9 dimensions of consciousness that can't fit into a 3rd strand activation. So we come in for a purpose, knowing our purpose. We come in teams, and it's always been this way. Incarnation just works this way. But then we forget who we are and what we came for, and our process of growing up is usually trying to remember and getting to the point where we figure out who we are, what we're here for, to make our lives meaningful. Because when we come in, when anybody comes in to an incarnational cycle on any place, any planet, there's that core purpose you came for, and if you can't find it, there's always a discomfort. There's always something that's not quite done or fixed or finished or right, and it moves you. It tries to take you into experiences that get you closer to understanding and remembering what you're here to do. In this time period, we're dealing with, as we talked about yesterday, some very intense dynamics of planetary mechanics that haven't happened here in over 200,000 years. We're dealing with a whole bunch of conflicting agendas that are taking place because of these planetary mechanics. Now, I'm going to have to I'm trying to feel, what I do with an audience is I feel where the energy is with the group, and I can feel the spaces where I'm going, and I'm going to have to try to make a bridge, because there's a lot of information I'd like to be able to give the 4 of you, If I had known for sure that you were coming, I didn't know that you were coming, I would have said come early and we'll give you a little crash course in what we did. You know, and I know that Michael had helped with that, but I would have given you probably an hour to go over to get you up where I could just go into everything today. I think I'm just going to take this in to where we left off and try to fill in enough where it makes some sense to what I'm talking about, because some of it was very, very specialized. What I had originally planned to come in with the group with today is, as it says on the flyers, we're dealing with the concept of what is an angelic human. We talked a lot yesterday about 12-strand DNA patterns. We talked about reclaiming the real human heritage. We talked about something called the Emerald Covenant, which is a co-creation agreement that was made 950 billion years ago in what's called density 5, which is an antimatter density level. It's a consciousness field. It's the entry point into time and into manifestation. There were basically 3 what are called Brennau. The Brennau are living light fields of consciousness that we all incarnate through. There are stages that we went through yesterday of our individuation process from God or from Source. Everything takes place within Source, is one of the things we covered, and there are certain steps that Source steps down its consciousness into smaller pieces in order to experience manifestation within itself. We are all a part of Source or God, and everything in manifestation is. You can never be separated from God, but you can feel the illusion of being separated from God. So we covered this paradigm that's called stair-step creation, and the people that haven't had it, that haven't had any exposure to that, there will be, in the next couple of days, some just kind of like for your information written material on that. So the things that make no sense to you right now, I will try to fill in the blanks for you, and everybody else will get those too. I'm trying to work on some handouts to give you, or at least to send you immediately after you get back, so you have some of what we covered in the workshops in general. Now, the big thing that we talked about yesterday is there are some problems that have arisen because we are entering something called a stellar activation cycle. Stellar activation cycle is a Stargate opening cycle. It's a natural phenomenon in planetary physics, and we have a lot of the physics to back that up, but that's not what's important right now. It's understanding the big picture of what we're in the middle of that's important. The last time a stellar activation cycle commenced was 210,216 years ago. There is no written record on this planet left about what that is and what that does. During the Atlantean period, which ended in 9558 BC, which is not that long ago, they did have some information on what stellar activation cycles were, and they did know how to operate something called the Planetary Templar Complex, which is the series of various different energy systems that are connected to the Stargates that literally fuel the planet and its life field with consciousness from primal life force currents, from the primal sound fields and primal light fields that are in a 15-dimensional spectrum. In a stellar activation cycle, as we covered yesterday, the primal life force currents from the higher dimensional spectrum come down into our reality field on the planetary level in Earth, where Earth is in a place called density 1, which is dimensions 1, 2, and 3. There are 5 density levels, and the passage down from Source as consciousness progressively integrating, getting more dense into matter. So in a 15-dimensional time matrix, there are 5 density levels. We are in the densest level here. In stellar activation cycle, stargates open, and the frequencies from the higher dimensional densities begin moving into the planet, changing the density level of the planet, and changing the density level of the people in their bodies, and opening their consciousness. So there's a lot of good things that we're going into in a stellar activation cycle. There's also a lot of conflict that happens with Earth when a stellar activation cycle takes place. We have been raised in a bubble for the last 22,500 years, a bubble of exclusion or seclusion. Our race has evolved at this point thinking we're alone in the universe, thinking that the old stories of angels and things that used to interact with humans were just the product of a mind, of the primitive mind, and our scientists know better than that, and they teach us to know better than that. The thing is, the old books that talked about, the records that we did have left, talked about angelic visitation and all those things. They were quite accurate in many ways, and some are quite distorted, but there have been angelic visitors here for a very long time. There's a difference between an ET and an angelic when I talk about that. ET forgets the fact of the densities. It forgets the fact that consciousness is the first and pure state of being, and that there's a process of becoming dense and manifest. So the whole ET concept is very misleading, because you start thinking about the sci-fi movies and things coming in saucers, and you think that that's it. That puts us in a position where we're going to look at E.T. things and think, oh, they're the gods from space that created us, and we're going to worship them. We don't worship anything. We don't need to worship anything that walks around in a dense matter body. We're not put here to worship. We were put here to be living expressions of Source. Now, in the ancient times, there were angelic records that kept track of the life fields in the higher dimensional densities. These records were called the angelic rosters. They talked about races that were much, much older than the human race, the founders' races and the seed races for our 15-dimensional time matrix. And they talked about the ones that maintained their connection to Source. And it's an energetic connection. You're always in Source. But to be able to embody that consciousness requires certain things in your system, your energy system, your manifestation template is the word I will use. And I'm trying not to use concepts that are going to lose you guys right away. And as you can probably tell, the rest of you, I'm trying to integrate this into so we can all just go off and run. It's a little challenging when new people come in, and I've gone into, like, we were doing what's called D9 information last night, ninth dimensional frequency transmission information. There's an energy that comes with that just kind of like moves through the room, and it helps everybody's consciousness to pick up, but you don't start there. You kind of go up from regular 3D consciousness and progress upward. And when a group of people is having that experience, it moves into a flow together. And then you get another group of people who didn't get to go there yet. So this is what I'm doing. I'm going to start, I think. I'm just going to go into what is an angelic human. What I would have begun with, if it was just us and we weren't trying to accommodate to make everybody feel comfortable, because that's one thing I will do. I value everybody. And I would ask the people that if you're in any situation, if you're in an advanced position, you happen to know more about this subject or something like that, care enough about the ones who don't yet to try to make a way where they can get to where you are with the understanding. It's a concept that in schools, if children that were like the real smart children or that had more training than the others were taught to go help those who didn't, everybody would do just fine. They'd get better. And it's not a communist stance. It's not that at all. It's just helping each other. So that's what I'm trying to do. Now, we're going to talk about the angelic human identity today. When I refer to the angelic human, most people realize I'm talking about the original human imprint. The original human genome was a 12-strand DNA template. 12-strand DNA template has the ability to fully embody 12 dimensions of consciousness. Dimension 12 is a field of pre-matter liquid light that we all have to pass through in order to get into density. And it's called the Christos field. That's a good way to translate what it is. It's actually a hydroplasmic field of liquid light. And as part of the densification process, we go from being part of Source into a sound field where God is as sound, and we are part of that. Then we get into a light field. It's a progressively stepping down the magnitude of the consciousness of Source into smaller pieces so individuation can be experienced. The angelic human was a very special race when it was created. It was created 560 million years ago in density 2 on a planet called Terra, which is the counterpart of Earth in density 1. It was created for a very specific purpose. In our time matrix, which is a 15-dimensional system, there had been so many problems with something called code convolution among the elder races that were here. Code convolution is when you have what's called a manifestation template that you come in on to manifest in a specific form. It's composed of scalar wave grids, or standing points of light and sound, that holds the identity of who you are in energy form. Code convolution occurs when it's kind of like inbreeding. So you hear of inbreeding down here. Certain families, they just reproduce within themselves so much that it starts to distort the gene code. Happens the same thing on templates, on the manifestation templates. Humans were created to assist the fallen races in this time matrix because they were getting so distorted in their consciousness and the activities that they would produce through that distortion that the whole integrity of this 15-dimensional time matrix was being compromised. Humans were created to hold, first of all, 12th dimensional consciousness, which meant they had the ability to be fully embodied avatar identities. They were created for the purpose of becoming guardians and keepers of what's called the interplanetary Templar complex. That is the Stargate system that runs through the 15-dimensional time matrix. Every planet has its own smaller Templar complex that's connected to the larger Templar complex of the universal field, the 15-dimensional field. Humans were created to come in and hold a level of consciousness into Earth's grids and into Terra's grids that would provide safety for this time matrix. We were created as a guardian race because there were things that were taking place between the ancient angelic legions. They were fighting among themselves, and they were creating damage. They were not using the natural principles of what's called unified field physics, which is the natural law of one energy dynamics by which time matrices continue to function. They were abusing those privileges, and there was a chance that our time matrix would actually implode. If a time matrix implodes, it means that all consciousness within it gets blown back to space dust or units of consciousness. You're still part of God, but you have no structure to hold the memory of what that means. So you become the substance of which other beings who do have memory create with. The big thing about spiritual development, the real reason why it's worth it, is because humanity has the potential to evolve into a type of being that can have full at-one-ment with Source while holding full memory of its experiences that it had in time before its ascension into Source. It's becoming a conscious co-creator with Source rather than simply the creative medium through which Source creates. There's a difference, and it's a celebration when beings can experience that expansion back into their original wholeness and hold the memory of the significance of what that means. Humans were created to bring that promise back to this time matrix because of the distortions in the consciousness of the ancient interstellar races that was taking place. It was very close to having this time matrix be destroyed. This time matrix was originally seeded 950 billion years ago, the last life seeding here. You know, creation just goes on forever and ever, backward and forward, upward and down. But the last time a life wave, they call it a life wave of consciousness from Source, moves into a time matrix and literally creates the fuel of consciousness for a whole new life field. That happens every so often, and they're very, very long periods of time. The last time our time matrix received that life field infusion directly from Source was 950 billion years ago. There were in every time matrix, there are three collectives that hold the living light field, which is the consciousness field that the rest will incarnate out of, that everything in that time matrix will move through. It's called our universal families of consciousness. They are our connection to Source. While we're in time, we connect to Source through them. There are three Brennau collectives. They call them Brennau. And Brennau has several meanings. The closest one is of the one. And it's talking about the one Source that we're all from. Humans were created to come back into this time matrix. The consciousness, the awareness, and the life force currents from the Brennau levels and from the sound fields and Source beyond them, because our time matrix was becoming cut off the grid. It's called being cut off the grid, where you're still in Source, but you can't pull in the energy of Source into you anymore. That grid becomes finite because it's energy connections, it's scalar wave connections that allow the flow of energy to come through, get blocked or distorted. Humans have a marvelous, marvelous history that when you come down on this planet and go through the educational processes here, you end up thinking you're nothing more than a piece of flesh walking around that has no purpose, has no meaning, and the only thing here to do is survive. That is a program that is very, very damaging because it's not allowing us to remember the true heritage. We have the heritage of a race that's called the Turanisium race. The word Tura refers to oversoul in the ancient Anahazi language, which was the first spoken language in our time matrix, the first auditory language. The Turanisium race was created to be a guardian race, to assist all the other beings that were having a real problem, fighting with each other, warring with each other, trying to destroy each other. We were supposed to be the harmonizers. The human form was composed by taking some of the higher angelic races, which are from density 3 and 4, and taking that imprint, which is called the Orifeme imprint, which is affiliated with the Sirius star system in density 4, which is pre-matter density. The Orifeme imprint was used, and into it was seeded a little bit of the genetic template of all of the primary stellar races. There were 12 primary seed races in our time matrix. So the human being became created to be able to hold the frequencies of all those 12 stellar races. So any being that was stuck within a race cycle of evolution that did not have the ability to connect to its Christos template anymore because of its code convolution could evolve to the highest level in its own species and then be able to transfer and begin human cycles of incarnation. And through the human imprint, they could get back the 12-strand pattern, which allowed them to connect to D12, which is the Christos. That's their key to getting out of the time matrix. Otherwise, you get stuck in the time matrix, however much energy your consciousness had when it came in becomes finite, and it expends itself after a while, and you literally de-evolve instead of evolve and expand back into source. The heritage and the legacy of the angelic human was very precious. They were it was a race that was very, very loved by the Brennau collectives of the light fields and also by the consciousness collectives of the sound fields beyond them, which are called the Janus collectives. These words are coming from the ancient languages that were spoken. So when you hear these strange words, where they get the names for these things, they're coming from a set of records that we talked about yesterday called the Cloister Duratura plates, or the CTD plates. These are discs. There are 12 discs, and I'm just going to fill these guys in a little bit on this, so when I refer to that, they have a clue of what I'm talking about. There are 12 discs that were created 248,000 years ago that held massive amounts of digitally stored information on the history of our time matrix, on the creation of humans, and on something called the Emerald Covenant, which was a co-creative agreement or co-evolution agreement between all the races in our time matrix from the highest levels to co-evolve together into peace and to help each other get back to where we all had our ability to ascend at will. So we weren't trapped anymore. So all the races that got themselves trapped in the time matrix weren't trapped anymore. The Cloister Duratura plates are physical. They have been brought into density at different times. And they contain massive records on the science of the Templars, the science of which are the energy systems in the planetary grids and the stargates. They contain massive information on the stair-step creation model, which is explaining how we got here and where we came from, how we got back, and what's the objective of this game. Okay? We start to realize that life isn't just a big bang that happened, we evolved out of pond scum, and there's no real reason to it. There's always a purpose and an intention, an intelligence behind that created that purpose and intention. The Cloister Duratura plates are the seeds of all our religions on the planet. We talked about the evolution of religion yesterday. Where did this thing come from called religion? It was brought to us by portions of our relatives from the higher density levels, the angelic legions. Now angelics, we're angelics too, okay? So angelics are beings. They're not just thought forms that poof in with wings. These are beings that are much older than our race is, that look to our race, some of them, with such hope and promise because they know what we were created for. We were given the Cloister Duratura plates 248,000 years ago as part of a restatement of the original Emerald Covenant to help bring peace to this planet and to the races on this planet that were part human, but also part of some of the ancient stellar races that had infiltrated this culture where they weren't supposed to. All of the information on the Cloister Duratura plates is drawn from what's called the ecstatic level of the energy matrix. In the diagrams that you received in those packages you got today, we have the 15-dimensional time matrix. Then beyond that, there's the fields of sound that are the energy matrix. There are 3 levels of expansion back into source. First you get out of time and you hit the polaric level, or the triadic level, then you go into the polaric level, then the last expansion before full expansion to source is called the ecstatic level, or the Eka. These are the Janus fields of consciousness. Some call them the Ascended Masters fields of consciousness. But that term is really abused in this day and age. Anything that makes it out of density 1 and gets to density 2, there's a lot of them walking around saying, oh, we're the Ascended Masters, follow us. They haven't even figured out how to get to density 3 yet. You know, so you have to be careful with the word Ascended Masters because you can end up with something that has a D6 consciousness telling you it knows everything in the universe about God. You happen to have a D9 or a D12 consciousness, and you actually know more, but they're convincing you that they know more than you. So anyway, we're taking place in this, we exist in this time matrix. There is a record. Our historians here may not understand where humans came from, but there is a record of where humans came from. All of our religions evolved from attempts of the higher angelics to bring that information back to us. At times they would bring these plates, these little silver discs that hold this data. And the silver discs, by the way, they're interesting. You'd have to learn how to run frequency through your kundalini in the body, run it through your arm, if you're holding them, and throw it through the palm chakra, push it into the disc, and the disc would begin to vibrate within itself, and then it would hit a certain level of vibration, and it would pop out holographic dramas. It would give you literally holographic movies projected onto air where you could watch the history unfold. And you could learn to mentally command it to stop or to start or to go to a certain period. This is a technology that was built from the angelic legions. It was a technology they had partial access to in Atlantean periods, even that recently. So when I talk about these things, I'm not trying to get you to believe something I decided to believe. I've seen these plates. I have the incarnational history myself of being part of different time periods when it was attempted to bring the information on these plates back. The last time was what we call the Christ period. That whole drama that became convoluted into a story that's now in the Bible, that lost 90% of its content, the person who was called Jesus was commissioned. He had a speaker's contract, which means he was trained from a very young age to be able to access information from the cloister door tour plates on behalf of the Brennau collectives, on behalf of the Janus consciousness fields of sound, on behalf of Source, to bring that information back here, because it's the heritage and the gift to the people of this planet. Right now we have a bunch of angels walking around on this planet who completely forgot who they are. And it's really sad, and they had a whole lot of help forgetting, because there's been a lot of manipulation that took place. We talked about yesterday how the reason human culture has evolved to where it is now occurred because really what humans were created for. They were created by the big guys high up. Okay? They were saying, it's getting out of control in this time matrix. All the children here are beginning to try to destroy each other. And we have to put a presence of ourselves here to start getting some, not control, but just peace happening before they all destroy themselves. There were certain of the ancient stellar races that were very glad that the human, it was an experiment to try to heal this time matrix. They were very glad it was created. They saw the potential. Now those fallen races have a chance. There's a form that they can evolve into, that they will get back their Christos template, and they will find their freedom. There were other races that didn't feel that way at all. The Anu Elohim were one of the fallen families out of the Elohai Elohim, which are founders races. They decided they want to take over the time matrix all by themselves and kick anything out of it that wasn't theirs. They created an Avenger race called the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were created specifically to get rid of the humans. So this conflict that humans have had with the Anunnaki races, there's all sorts of pieces of it floating around the New Age movement now, has been about one race coming in to try to fix things, and the other race being created for the purpose of fulfilling their higher-ups' desire to take over a time matrix and force their will on other beings. I feel a lot of compassion for the Anunnaki races. They are an angelic race too, but they have the maximum of 11-strand DNA capacity. They do not have the ability to generate on their own the 12-strand template. Without that, they cannot plug into the Christos field, which means they can't plug into the perpetual living light fields or sound fields. So they are finite and they are trapped in time. There's a lot of other races like that too. The Draconians are another race like that. Some of the Anunnaki have wanted to get out of that situation. They're not evil. We don't teach evil in Azurite Temple. We teach the law of one. And in the law of one, there is nothing evil. There are only things that remember they're part of God, and there are things that don't remember that they're part of God. And when things don't remember that they're part of God and Source, they don't remember their connection to each other, and they behave in ways that can be very destructive because they are in pain, because their consciousnness cannot hold the love and the joy that what it means to remember your connection. So when I talk about fallen races, I'm not talking about it in a polarity context. When we're exploring our angelic human heritage, we need to start thinking about how we look at things like that. A true angelic human does not look at anything in terms of good versus evil. It knows there is no evil. When it sees a situation where perhaps angelics are beginning to war among themselves and humans are getting tied up in the middle of it and don't even know it, which is what's taking place now. There are no enemies in this game. except for those who think that they're enemies and behave in those ways. If we're going to make a shift from a three-dimensional person trying to figure out its spiritual heritage into an angelic human who remembers and just feels the memory of that heritage, where we begin to act in ways that we were created to be, which was to be representatives of Source, walking around wherever we were put. Love is the first and foremost ingredient that has to be identified. We talked yesterday a lot about some of the really nasty things that some of the Anunnaki legions have done to us in our past. These are things they will not tell you about. These are things that recently we had promised we wouldn't tell all right away, to give them a chance if they wanted to work peacefully here. Because if humans knew what they did and they came in here to try to visit, they wouldn't be welcomed. They broke agreements recently, as you know, a thing called the Treaty of Voltaire. There is a tape on this for you guys, by the way, from yesterday. It will make a lot more sense. I'm just going to touch little phrases there to keep you up. We are in the middle. And this was even prophesied in the Bible in a very kind of twisted way. That Armageddon scenario, well, it's not starting on Earth. It's starting in density 2. But Earth is at its center. And it will come here if we don't remember our heritage enough as angelic humans to begin to make a difference, which we can do. The information in these workshops was meant, in this particular block of them, emerged out of something that happened in September. On September 12th, something called the Treaty of Voltaire was broken. In the Treaty of Voltaire, the Anunnaki angelic legions and some of the other, let's say, antagonizers of our race had agreed to uphold the Emerald Covenant coevolution agreement. They promised they would help, and they promised they would be nice this time. They broke that. The treaty was made in July.